1,000 meters above the frigid North Sea, disaster strikes. A helicopter is crippled in the middle of a sudden storm. The pilots struggle for control as it sinks helplessly towards the sea. They're far from land, off the radar screens. No one knows exactly where they are. In the days that follow, investigators search for the truth hidden in this tangled wreck. The cause of the crash shocks those involved and reveals a hidden danger that reaches far beyond the North Sea.
3,000? Here. We're not getting any oxygen. We have the terrain alarm. Aero crew 603. We are in an emergency.
The need for oil drives men to some of the most unpleasant places on Earth. This is one of them. The North Sea divides Britain from mainland Europe. It's a shallow sea, and the cruel winds that race across it can whip up enormous waves. The sea is cold, grey, and violent. But there's oil out here. And so dozens of drilling platforms and thousands of men must face whatever the weather throws at them. The only efficient way to get the men out there is by helicopter. The flights are rough and long, up to 500 kilometers each way. After years, the trip has become largely routine. The danger below forgotten by many.
What was that?
But on a cold January morning in 1995, 18 men flying over the North Sea were faced with a horrible question.
Mayday, mayday, mayday! Tail rotor failure! Ditching!
Could they survive in this extremely hostile environment?
Oh, God! Oh.
January the 19th, 1995. Commander Sed Roberts and First Officer Lionel Sole work for Bristow Helicopters in Aberdeen, Scotland. Their job is to ferry oil workers out to the oil platforms in the North Sea. By mid-morning, they've completed one trip already and are getting ready to head back out. Their helicopter is Super Puma 56 Charlie. While it's being checked out and refueled, Flight Officer Sole checks the flight logs, and Commander Roberts goes through the weather reports, which are updated every 2 hours.
Oh, weather's okay. Good for January.
This is where they're heading, the North Sea. The discovery of oil here in the 1960s was a shot in the arm for the British economy. Brent crude, as the oil is known, is a light, sweet crude, ideal for turning into gasoline. And its price is a benchmark on the international oil market. It helped turn Aberdeen, the Scottish port city closest to the oil rigs, into a boom town, the European oil capital. All the leading oil companies have offices here. The city is focused on getting the black gold ashore. Because the rigs are so far offshore and the weather so unpredictable, helicopters are the only way to reliably ferry workers back and forth. Hundreds of thousands of people make the trip every year. The Super Pumas are one of the workhorses of the North Sea oil industry. Used around the world by industry and military, they're durable, tough, and made to withstand the elements. There are more of these helicopters flying offshore here than anywhere else in the world. The passengers heading to the platforms today gather in the heliport's departure lounge. They all work for the Texas company Marathon Oil. The North Sea has scores of oil fields. They're divided up between several countries, including England and Norway. The governments then sell the rights to drill to a variety of oil companies. Marathon operates 3 platforms in the so-called Bray field: Bray East, Bravo, and Alpha. North Sea oil platforms are like cities that never sleep. They stand on the seabed, held up by enormous legs made of either metal or concrete. Below each one, pipes snake out to the seabed. Some punch straight down, others fanning out at an angle for up to several kilometers. The same platform may be extracting both oil and natural gas at the same time. Out here, you're surrounded by the sea, with nowhere to go. The weather is often horrible, and the work on a rig can be rough, dirty, and dangerous. It's difficult to find and retain the skilled workers needed to pull the oil from the sea, so the platforms are built to keep the workers happy. Movies, internet cafes, gym equipment, even great food are all provided by management to ensure the men are entertained. During 12-hour shifts, workers handle heavy equipment and deal with great heights or great depths. But there are strict rules too. To protect the safety of everyone on board, there's no drinking, and smoking is severely restricted.
Mayday! Explosion of fire on the Piper platform. All personnel abandoned.
One of Britain's worst disasters happened in the North Sea oil fields. In 1988, on Occidental Petroleum's Piper Alpha platform, the gas exploded and set fire to oil. A 167 men died. The potential for disaster is never far away. But on this January day, the Marathon oil workers prepare as they always do. All 16 are scheduled to spend 2 weeks on Marathon's Alpha platform, followed by 2 weeks off. To these men, getting to work has become routine. But getting a ticket on this flight calls for something a little out of the ordinary. None of them is permitted to board a helicopter without first going through this: helicopter underwater escape training. Their lives may depend on knowing how to get out of a submerged helicopter or oil rig, and knowing what to do once they find themselves in the chilly North Sea. Several accidents over more than 20 years have driven home the point. Training may help a worker survive. Before they set off on every flight, they must watch the video, how to behave if there's an emergency on your flight.
Brace impact.
They've seen it all 1,000 times.
In an emergency, if time does not permit, just tighten your lap strap and brace for impact. To exit through the windows, pull the red tab to completely remove the rubber seal.
The passengers fasten their survival suits. Made of Gore-Tex, these dry suits won't keep them afloat, but are supposed to keep the water out if the workers are thrown into the sea.
Obstruct the forward windows.
Their bright colors are also designed to make rescue easier. The trip to the Bray Alpha oil platform is 230 kilometers. If all goes well, it will take little more than an hour. Then, 120 miles out, they'll reach an area called the Gate. That's where all the helicopters split up and go their separate ways to the individual oil platforms. Bray Alpha is about 40 kilometers from the Gate. For part of the journey, the radar operators at air traffic control in Aberdeen won't be able to see them.
The reason why we lose low-level radar coverage out over the North Sea is, in essence, because the Earth is round. As a helicopter's flying outbound to an oil rig, it's actually following the curvature of the Earth.
But radar pulses travel in straight lines, which means that as they travel further and further away, a gap opens up between the surface of the Earth and the radar waves.
If an aircraft flies into that gap, then it'll disappear from radar. In the case of Aberdeen, a helicopter operating about 2,000 feet will disappear into that gap at about 80 miles.
It's a black hole, which Super Puma 56 Charlie is now entering. The helicopter and the 18 men on board are over halfway to the rigs, and from this moment on, no one knows exactly where they are. 56 Charlie is a Super Puma helicopter serving the North Sea oil platforms off the coast of Britain. It's halfway through a long flight carrying 16 passengers to the Bray Alpha oil rig. The crew is getting concerned about what they see on their weather radar. The forecast called for scattered clouds, but the weather is changing fast.
What do you think about this cloud?
It's quite thin.
Yeah, but look, we're getting some cumulus too. It's quite small, about 100 yards across.
Yeah, but it's developing a bit.
Cumulus are puffy white clouds like balls of cotton wool. They're beautiful to look at and usually harmless. They only last between 5 and 40 minutes. But helicopter pilots prefer to go above them if possible, because the air inside and below gets very bumpy.
Let's try to climb above it. Go to 5,000 feet.
Right. Oh, look, there's a line of them. All along the route exactly where we're going.
Yeah, we're not gaining anything by this. Let's drop back down to 3,000 feet.
Right.
So far, the weather is nothing to worry about. But over the North Sea, it can change suddenly. This corner of Europe is where the warm winds from the Atlantic meet the icy blasts from the Arctic and Siberia. The warm water vapor condenses into clouds, cools, then sinks. It creates strong winds, pushing the huge masses around. The friction caused by this motion can make the clouds electrically charged, and that electricity can be released as lightning. What starts out as a placid day can end up in a violent storm. It's now 1 hour after takeoff, and 56 Charlie is approaching the gate, the point where helicopters begin their descent to the individual oil platforms. They're 25 miles from their destination, and the weather is starting to get worse.
Bray traffic, 56 Charlie, 120 miles on the 056 HMR.
They make contact with Bray Traffic Watch, located on one of the oil platforms. It handles all the comings and goings of helicopters. But Bray Traffic doesn't have radar. It has to rely on the pilots to tell them where they are.
Leaving 3,000 feet, would you take the flight watch?
Roger, 56 Charlie, I have your flight watch.
Aberdeen information, Bristow's 56 Charlie at 120 miles. Leaving 3,000 feet, Bray has the flight watch.
Roger, 56 Charlie, continue with Bray traffic.
Quite suddenly, the weather has changed. Instead of the harmless fluffy balls of cotton wool, a line of dangerous cumulonimbus clouds is now blocking their path. They rise up like huge white mountains, more than 10,000 meters, far higher than the chopper can fly. Underneath, they're dark and menacing. Pilots try to avoid them at all costs. Inside, gusts of wind can reach up to 100 kilometers an hour. The turbulence can make the flight unpleasant, but that's only part of the danger.
The cumulonimbus, that's the granddaddy of all clouds. It stretches from around about 1,000 feet at its base all the way up to 30,000 feet. They are the most dangerous clouds that aircraft can come across, particularly small aircraft like helicopters. Within a cumulonimbus, you're going to find severe turbulence, you're going to find icing, you're going to find heavy rain, and of course you're going to find lightning. If you're flying a helicopter, that's not where you want to be.
Lightning is one of the most powerful forces of nature. Around the Earth, it strikes an average of 100 times per second, each strike with a power of up to 1 billion volts. Aircraft can't completely avoid it. On average, every passenger jet will be hit once a year by lightning, but the design of the planes helps prevent them being badly damaged. Their bodies are traditionally made of aluminium, which is a good conductor of electricity. The lightning passes harmlessly along the fuselage and exits from the tail. Helicopters use the same type of design to keep safe, and helicopters need it in the North Sea. With such stormy weather and so many helicopters, lightning strikes are inevitable. As they begin their descent, the Super Puma enters the line of clouds that stands in their path.
Bits of cloud coming up here.
No, it's okay. It's still green. Let's carry on through that.
Green on the weather radar means there's rain, but it's not heavy enough to worry about.
What the pilot sees in that is actually simply like a television screen. On that television screen he has a map, and overlaid on top of that map is a series of banded colours. If there's no rain, he has a blank map. If there's lots of rain and it's heavy, he has lots of red squares on that, and that gives you the idea of the intensity and the location of the rainfall.
On board 56 Charlie, the weather gets more intense. They begin to get pelted by hail.
Hey, where'd this come from?
It's coming in through the vent.
It's like being inside a beanbag swamped by polystyrene balls.
It's so thick. How come the engines are still running? There can't be any air left out there.
No.
Now another problem.
We've got a hard over on the ice detector.
It's probably just an ice pellet stuck in the probe.
Right.
The helicopter has an ice detector, a probe outside the craft, which is supposed to tell the pilots whether there's ice on the blades. But they think it's become jammed with ice and is giving a false reading. And then, disaster.
Bloody hell.
What was that?
Lightning, I saw it. Well, this is bad. There's something very, very wrong with this. We'll have to go down, I'm afraid.
The helicopter has been damaged, but they don't know how badly. The entire body is shaking and vibrating. The crew's first instinct is to get down to a lower altitude in case the worst happens and they fall out of the sky.
Mayday, Mayday, 5-6 Charlie, lightning strike, severe vibration. Mayday, Mayday.
40 kilometers away, another helicopter is about to leave an oil platform. Commander Brian Backhouse is loading passengers onto 56 Bravo and preparing to fly back to Aberdeen.
That's everyone. All set.
Suddenly, the loading officer hears Lionel Sol's Mayday call on his radio.
Mayday, Mayday, 5-6 Charlie, lightning strike.
Hear that, Mayday, 56 Charlie! Gentlemen, my apologies, but we have to disembark you. We have an airborne emergency on a sister aircraft.
Backhouse hurriedly unloads his passengers. He intends to help if he can. Meanwhile, a gale is steadily building up, with winds in excess of 70 kilometers an hour. The seas are mounting. The crew of 56 Charlie are struggling to keep control of their crippled helicopter. After the initial flash, though, the situation hasn't got worse. The Grampian Freedom is a standby ship positioned near the oil rigs to give oil workers a way to escape if anything goes wrong. Her skipper, John McInnes, hears the helicopter's distress call.
We increased the full speed ahead. Everybody was informed about the vessel and told to get ready for survivors to be taken aboard.
Back on the Bravo platform, what was a routine flight for Brian Backhouse is about to become a rescue mission. He intends to find the stricken helicopter and nurse it to safety. If it crashes into the sea, he'll direct rescue ships to the spot. But they're not sure where to go.
Let's go to the gate and proceed from there.
At least they have a starting point. The Grampian Freedom doesn't know where to go either. They're getting conflicting messages about where 56 Charlie is. The helicopter's tiny size and the rough seas make it hard to find. On the damaged helicopter, Commander Roberts briefs the passengers.
Gentlemen, you are obviously aware of the severe vibration. We've had a lightning strike, so please pull up your hoods, zip up your suits, and prepare for a possible ditching.
Countless hours of training is supposed to have prepared all on board for a moment like this. In a real emergency, how many will remember it?
1,200 feet. We're still flying. Let's try to make it to Bray Alpha and land there.
Their destination, the Bray Alpha platform, is now only 11 kilometers away. 3 minutes have passed since the explosion, and things don't seem to be getting any worse.
I'll just try a few small inputs, make sure everything's working. Yes, we've got control in pitch, we've got control in roll, and we've got control in yaw. Tail rotor!
The helicopter is beginning to spin round, a sure sign that something's happened to the tail rotor. The only thing the pilots can do to stop the spinning is to switch off the main rotor blade.
Power off, engines off.
Ditching has become inevitable. .56 Charlie is falling fast, more than 600 meters a minute, with the main rotor acting like a kind of parachute, the blades being turned only by the air that rushes through them.
Mayday, mayday. Tail rotor failure, ditching. Brace for emergency landing.
At this speed, they're about 40 seconds from hitting the North Sea. The other pilots in 56 Bravo are searching in vain. There's no sign of 56 Charlie in the sky or in the water. Then they hear another distress call.
Mayday, mayday. Tail rotor failure, ditching.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Relaying for 56 Charlie. We have a suspected tail rotor failure. He is ditching.
Commander Backhouse in 56 Bravo knows that he is closest to the stricken helicopter. Everything depends on him. But he's not equipped to locate the distress beacon 56 Charlie will use when it ditches. All he can do is search mile after mile of grey sea. Back on the Grampian Freedom, the crew begins searching the sea as well as the sky. But they know 56 Bravo can cover ground more quickly than the enormous, slow-moving ship. They do what they can and wait for better directions.
Floats, floats, I can't find the floats!
I got it. Just keep it at trim angle. Right.
The pilots of 56 Charlie are about to attempt one of the most difficult maneuvers, ditching or landing in the middle of the heaving sea. Floats under the helicopter are meant to keep it from sinking. If they're deployed too soon before touchdown, the chopper may lose what little stability it has and topple over. Too late, and they won't inflate completely. Instead of riding the waves, the helicopter will sink below them. There's no second chance. They time it perfectly.
We're down.
Seems quite stable.
They've landed safely, but no one knows if they will stay afloat. Helicopters are top-heavy, and they fear it could keel over and sink at any moment.
Let's get out of here! To the door!
They need to get the life rafts out, inflate them, and board them quickly. They fear that if the helicopter rolls over, it will trap them all inside.
Lift that end! On the rope!
You go back and help with the evacuation. I'm going to shut things down here. Right. I'm going to try one last mayday call.
But the evacuation doesn't go smoothly. When they throw out one of the life rafts, the strong wind blows it back against the helicopter. They can't get into it.
Can't get this one down. Can we go on the other side? It's better we all stay together anyway. Off you go! Go on! Go on! Go! Go!
Mayday, mayday.
56 Charlie. We are on the water, floating, manning the dinghy.
He doesn't mention their position.
Make room! Get set! Make room!
The raft is dangerously overloaded. There are 18 on board, and it's only meant for 14. Water is already up to their ankles and rising. Once in the raft, they have no way of communicating where they are. For the first time, the pilots are able to see what caused the disaster. The rear rotor blade assembly and gearbox have broken off and are hanging down the side of the helicopter, held on by just a couple of pipes. No one realizes it yet, but in the rush, they've forgotten to bring the distress beacon with them from the helicopter. It sends out a signal that can be picked up by rescuers. Forgetting it could mean the difference between life and death. 2 ropes attach the life raft to the helicopter. They're meant to stop the raft from drifting away, but they'll also drag them down if the helicopter sinks. One of the passengers has a knife.
Shall I cut the line?
No, not yet. We have a better chance of being spotted if we're close to the helicopter.
Problems mount. The passengers are trying to raise the canopy to protect them, but it gets stuck. Without the canopy, they're at the mercy of the waves. And then the helicopter itself becomes a danger. When the doors were jettisoned, they were supposed to be designed to slip down into the water and sink. Instead, one of them, which has a jagged edge, is floating on the surface, and it's heading straight for the raft. The life raft has been punctured by the floating door.
Come on, Bill! Bill, with everything you got, we're gonna sink!
No, don't worry about it. We're not gonna sink.
We've got double-layer rubber tubes here filled with air! It cannot sink! One wave and we're under!
No.
The pilots do their best to put on a brave face.
There are other helicopters and ships out there! They know we're down! They heard our Mayday!
The overloaded life raft is getting lower and lower in the water. Inside, it's already waist deep. Now the pounding waves are pushing them beneath the sharp edges of the drooping helicopter blades.
We need to get some distance! We'll have to cut the line!
There are supposed to be 2 safety lines connecting the raft to the helicopter. One short, one long. But the long line is broken.
The long line's been cut! It's been shredded!
You'll have to cut the short one!
The short line is the only thing attaching them to the helicopter. If they cut that, they'll quickly drift away, a tiny raft full of men at the mercy of the sea. But if they don't cut it, the jagged edges of the helicopter could tear their life raft to shreds and sink them all. 18 people have scrambled aboard a life raft after their helicopter crashed into the North Sea. The raft is overloaded. It's been punctured by the jagged metal edges of the helicopter door and is getting lower and lower in the water. They have to get away from the helicopter. Flight Officer Lionel Soule takes the fateful decision and cuts the rope. They begin to drift away into the storm. The conditions are deadly. Most of their survival suits are leaking freezing water. For a person in the water, hypothermia can begin when the temperatures of air and water added together is below 50 degrees centigrade. In the North Sea in winter, the temperature is far below that. Normal muscle and brain functions are quickly affected. The core body temperature will sink, followed by unconsciousness and death. Their chances of rescue are slim. No one knows where they are, just a tiny dot on a vast, turbulent sea.
Quiet! Quiet! I hear something!
There's a helicopter!
The men are desperate. This could be their last chance.
Quickly! Pass me those flares! The flares! In the pocket behind you! Spot a flare, you fly bastard! Here it is! We're over here!
But it's all in vain. The helicopter passes by. The men can't believe it. Their only hope is gone. On 5-6 Bravo, Brian Backhouse can see only grey seas. But suddenly, his co-pilot spots something.
Contact. Right. 2 o'clock. Okay, Roger. Let's investigate. Target. Contact.
Target confirmed. 56 Charlie. Stand by for position report.
Like a guardian angel, 5-6 Bravo hovers directly above the survivors for over an hour, directing rescue boats and aircraft towards this tiny speck in the ocean.
He came in and hovered fairly close because he wanted to count the number of people on board the life raft. So for a while he was right over the top of us and blowing us around a bit. But as soon as he'd gotten the information he wanted, he backed off and he was just marking the position for the rescue craft to find us.
First to arrive is the Grampian Freedom.
We had lookouts posted all around the vessel, some on top of the bridge, on each wing of the bridge. A helicopter came and it started crisscrossing our bow, which is not our procedure in that kind of situation.
Almost a mile away from the raft, the Grampian Freedom launches its fast rescue boat. The boat sets off at full speed to the rescue. The rain and waves make finding the raft difficult.
Hey! There's a boat! It's coming! No, don't think us! Relax, boys, they know what they're doing! Let's go! Quickly, go!
The rescue boat throws a lifeline to the stranded men, and they begin pulling themselves to safety. But there's another challenge ahead their training hasn't prepared them for.
We reached the standby boat, and you're looking at the hull, a huge steel hull. You said, I'm never going to get up there. But the crews are well trained. They wait for the swell to go up and down in the right motions.
And they have a large net hanging down the side of the boat. And they said, we're going to come alongside, we'll be on the top of the wave, and when we shout jump, you jump and grab the net. Don't look back, because we'll be gone. We came alongside, high up on the wave, grabbed the net, the wave went back down, they were away, and they pulled off, and we just climbed the last few feet over the side onto the Grampian Freedom.
Later that day, a rescue helicopter winches up 14 of the survivors and flies them back to Aberdeen. 4 of the men, however, never want to travel in a helicopter again, so they refuse to leave the Grampian Freedom. They're in for ever more misery. They're buffeted by a force 10 gale the whole of their long journey back to Aberdeen. Through their skill and against all the odds, Cedric Roberts and Lionel Soule have saved the lives of all on board.
I must admit at the time I did think that was it, we were going to die.
The whole world had changed from being really good to being what I thought was a complete disaster at that time. It was the worst situation I'd ever been in the air, and I was very worried that that was going to be it.
But the day after the accident, they came under suspicion. Their report on what happened starts being questioned.
Lightning, notionally at least, should not affect a very powerful North Sea helicopter.
This is the first time I can recall a lightning strike having ended up with this kind of conclusion.
The experts are skeptical of the pilot's story. No other helicopter is known to have crashed into the North Sea because of lightning. Perhaps there had been some mechanical failure. There were even whispers of pilot error, of recklessly flying into storm clouds. The evidence to support their story was now beneath the waves with 56 Charlie. The Air Accident Investigation Branch, Britain's air crash detectives, begins searching for the truth. It may look like a rig, but the stay dive is actually a ship, mostly used for servicing oil platforms. It has 9 powerful engines which keep it stable in almost any weather. And it carries miniature submarines for underwater exploration. A day after the accident, it's brought in to find and raise the missing helicopter from the bottom of the North Sea. The investigation gets off to a good start. Within a day, the television cameras on board the Stay Dive's 2 submersibles locate what's left of 56 Charlie on the seabed. But raising it is a different matter. carry on working into the night. Soon, several pieces of 5-6 Charlie have been recovered, but still not the vital clue, the missing tail rotor. Ed Trimble was the AAIB's lead investigator.
But the big problem was to recover the tail rotor assembly. Without that, the investigation was literally going nowhere. We knew that the tail rotor assembly had been dangling over the side of the pylon as the helicopter had ditched, and it therefore detached at some point between the ditching and where we had caught up with the main wreckage.
Keeping the stay dive going would cost another £20,000 a day. Ed Trimble rang his boss.
He was fairly skeptical of our chances. He asked what I thought our chances were of finding the tail rotor, and I, being an eternal optimist, I said 80%, to which he replied, I think you'd be very lucky if you've got a 10% chance of recovering the tail rotor assembly in the North Sea.
Ed Trimble stays up all night, relentlessly monitoring the underwater cameras.
I didn't want to be in a situation where we would have missed any evidence of further wreckage, and in particular, any parts of the tail rotor assembly.
Go get yourself a coffee, Eddie.
And by the time 8 o'clock was looming, I decided to go down to the galley to get a coffee. And I couldn't have been away any more than maximum 7 to 10 minutes when I suddenly heard these tremendously excited shouts from our team.
Yes, here we go, we found it!
As I walked in, I ran in, there, smack in the middle of the screen, was the whole of the tail rotor assembly. And even at the first glance, I could see that one of the tail rotor blades showed clear evidence of a lightning strike.
The crew was right. The submarine's cameras revealed telltale burn marks on the tail rotor blade. A close look at the wreckage on the deck reveals that 2 of the main rotor blades were also struck by lightning. But it's this tail rotor that suffered the most damage. Since lightning is not known to have forced a helicopter to crash into the North Sea before, the question is, why now? Ed Trimble called in lightning expert John Hardwick to discover just what had hit 5-6 Charlie.
What we wanted to do with this set of tests was to take a set of tail rotor blades from the Super Puma helicopter and subject them to varying energy levels of simulated lightning strikes.
The lightning objectives at Culham basically were to try and reproduce the degree of lightning damage in order to identify what kind of level of energy was associated with this particular strike.
This home video of the tests was taken by Ed Trimble. Representatives of the company that makes the Super Puma were there too. Hardwick ran the blade through several lightning strikes until he was able to reproduce the damage found on the rotor blade. To do it, he had to generate a simulated strike of enormous power. Something far more dangerous than anyone thought the helicopter would be exposed to. Something that wasn't supposed to happen over the North Sea.
There have been a few incidents over the years, minor strikes, a little bit of damage to the helicopter, but we never expected anything as severe as happened on that day.
For one brief instant, it was more than all the electrical power being consumed in the entire United States. Some 30 billion watts. And this enormous flash of lightning had happened over the North Sea, where each year almost 3 million passengers fly unsuspecting to the oil platforms.
The helicopters we fly are certified to the highest standards. It's the same as you get on a major airliner flying transatlantic. So we had no reason to believe that any lightning we had encountered would do any severe damage to the helicopter.
Ordinary lightning wouldn't. But this wasn't ordinary.
A lightning strike generates a huge pulse of energy. We can detect these pulses of energy via multiple transmitters and receivers that are situated throughout Europe. The information is calibrated locally, and once the position has been triangulated, that's passed to the Met Office in London.
When the records were examined, they showed something very peculiar. This is what they think happened. Inside cumulonimbus clouds, tiny ice crystals are swept upwards by the wind currents. At the top of the cloud, where it's much colder, they combine with other crystals to form hail. The hail, being heavy, plummets back to Earth. On the way down, it hits the rising water crystals, causing friction. The crystals become electrically charged.
On that particular day, there was very little in the way of indication that there was any significance in these clouds.
We're flying along, everything just seemed very normal. We went through what seemed to us, by comparison to what was around that day, a fairly small cloud. But there was suddenly a lot of snow and ice pellets in the air.
I've never seen as much in the way of soft hail pellets in my whole flying career. And the worrying thing was that immediately we knew that obviously there was a high level of energy in that cloud to produce that amount of soft hail, which also meant there was a high chance of there being lightning there. But by that time it was too late.
When a helicopter enters the cloud, the sharp tips of its whirling rotor blades cut through these crystals, causing more friction, more electricity, until it's all released in a blinding flash. The records showed that the flash which hit 5-6 Charlie had been the only one recorded over the North Sea that day, caused almost certainly by the helicopter itself. However, for some reason, nearly all the damage had been confined to the tail rotor. What was it about the tail rotor that had made it especially vulnerable? Then Ed Trimble made a remarkable discovery. When the civil aviation authorities certified the Super Puma as safe, they had missed something important, something which may have caused 5-6 Charlie to fall from the sky. Safety investigators examined the wreckage of a helicopter which crash-landed in the North Sea. As they study the ruined aircraft more closely, they uncover the cause of the accident. When the British Civil Aviation Authority laid down the lightning safety standards, they were looking at fiberglass blades, then the normal material for helicopter rotors. But in the 1980s, plane makers began using the new composite materials, like carbon fiber, which were lighter and stronger. In particular, they began making the rotor blades out of carbon fiber instead of fiberglass. It was assumed that the same standards would apply equally to the new blades. In the industry, that's known as read across, and it's very dangerous. In fact, it was the very design of these composite blades which brought down 5-6 Charlie. Although made of carbon fiber, composite blades have a metal anti-erosion strip glued on to protect the edge. That's where the trouble starts.
Carbon is a conductor of electricity, but it's 1,000 times worse than aluminium. So you get 1,000 times as much heat produced.
The carbon blade gets very, very hot. And when the current meets the metal strip running along the edge, there is furious arcing and sparking, until finally part of the erosion strip explodes. As little as 100 grams of the erosion strip flew off, but it was enough. Without its weight, the rear rotor was unbalanced. That's what caused the vibration felt on board 5-6 Charlie immediately after the lightning strike. 3 minutes later, when Lionel Sole tested out the controls, the unbalanced blades put the tail rotor under enormous stress. The bolts holding it on snapped.
We've lost the tail rotor!
Tail rotor's gone!
It was like a blowout in a car, only much, much worse. Things at that point were really very, very worrying. We both knew what had happened. We'd lost the tail rotor. And if you don't do exactly the right thing at that point, your life expectancy is very short. It's seconds. We had to do the right thing. We managed to point it into wind, and there was quite a big sea building up. And at 100 feet, I pulled back on the stick to flare the helicopter, slow down its rate of descent, and we were very fortunate at that point. A nice friendly wave came along, and as I leveled the helicopter, a wave came up. We sat on the top of it, and we went down, and it was one of the best landings I've ever done, but that was luck more than judgment.
As bad as it was, it could have been worse, The two hydraulic pipes connecting the assembly to the helicopter did not break.
These two small diameter pipes had held the mass of the gearbox and tail rotor assembly dangling over the right side of the pylon.
Without the weight of the rotor assembly, the helicopter would have tipped forward.
Had that tail rotor gearbox and tail rotor assembly completely separated from the helicopter, then all 18 lives would have been lost because the helicopter would have pitched down irrecoverably and gone into the North Sea.
The investigators found the answer to the mystery of a helicopter crash, but they stumbled across a bigger problem, one that affects every air traveler. Investigators believe that 5-6 Charlie's violent end was caused by a savage lightning strike greater than anything it was built to withstand. And when the lightning hit, it exposed a problem in the carbon fiber blades that made them vulnerable. The tremendous heat created where the carbon fiber met the metal erosion strip could occur again. And the same type of violent reaction could hypothetically take place in any aircraft that has carbon fiber mixed with other materials. Increasingly, aluminium is being replaced with carbon fiber. The world's largest plane, the A380 Airbus, for instance, has over 20%. What will happen if these planes encounter a monster lightning strike? This was the investigators' biggest concern arising out of this Super Puma accident. The findings were unexpected and treated with some skepticism. Though the tests indicated that an unexpectedly large lightning strike hit 5-6 Charlie, Britain's Civil Aviation Authority refused to accept it. No action was taken to increase the safety standards that these helicopters must meet.
I thought that the reaction was poor. There seemed to be a real reluctance on their behalf to accept the evidence.
If Britain's air crash detectives are right, there is a real concern facing air travelers. Flashes of lightning far greater than aircraft are supposed to encounter are possible. And aircraft made of newer composite materials are at increased risk. For the Super Puma, though, the lessons have been learned. The design of the rotor blades has been vastly strengthened. The erosion strips are now secured with heavy bolts, and pilots have been instructed to give storm clouds a wider berth. The men who must fly these machines to work are prepared to accept the risks.
Well, I think the morning we ditched, we were very, very fortunate because the outcome could have gone horribly wrong, but we survived. We got home. My feelings of that morning was this could never happen to me. Now, when I fly in a chopper, especially in the winter time, if it's going to be buffed about with wind, I sometimes get in the back of your mind, this can't happen to me again. But we've all a choice. We've all a choice either to stop or we carry on. And I'm still there 25 years later, still learning and living.
The crash of 5-6 Charlie was a hair-raising incident that could so easily have ended in tragedy. In the winter of 1995, the skill of Commander Ced Roberts and Flight Officer Lionel Soule saved the lives of their 16 passengers. Roberts and Soule receive an award for their work. The Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators recognized their skill and bravery in the emergency landing.
Although we received a number of awards after the incident from various organisations, one thing I received, which is far more precious to me than any of them, was from the daughters of one of my passengers. It was this little card. It says, "Dear Captain Roberts, I can't tell you how much I need to thank you after you saved my dad's life. It took a lot of effort to try to keep calm while you were falling. If you hadn't have got that helicopter in control, my dad maybe wouldn't be here today. Thank you very, very, very much."
A shipwreck in the Greek islands. Hundreds of people fight for survival in a swirling storm. With their lives on the line, some people become heroes.
Don't let go!
Others do whatever it takes to stay alive.
Keep her away! She'll kill us both!
Investigators uncover an extraordinary chain of events. Small mistakes which have deadly consequences.
Mayday! Mayday! We're doing 90 miles an hour! Out of control! Take a life jacket!
Where's the Coast Guard?
Don't let go!
A passenger ferry pushes its way through a storm.
What is that?
Within sight of land, this Greek island's ferry is sinking in high winds and stormy seas.
There was a hole, and it was going to sink, and it was going to sink fast.
A huge rescue operation kicks in. Rescuers must risk their own lives.
I never want to be in that situation ever again, because it was terrifying.
But I had enough time to think, okay, well, this is the part where I die.
It was like a catastrophe. It was as if it was coming the end of the world for this island.
For the people of Greece, it's a national disaster, the worst of its kind in 30 years. Discovering why it happened will take months of detective work and raise this question: how safe are the ships we sail on? The Greek capital, Athens. This great metropolis has a 3,000-year history. A history built around the city's easy access to the Mediterranean. The harbor district of Athens is called Piraeus. Ferry boats ply back and forth between here and the more than 200 islands scattered throughout the Aegean Sea. For island hoppers, this is where the adventure begins.
It's here somewhere. It has to be.
Mayday today would be good.
I'm hurrying. Are you sure you don't got...
Tuesday, September the 26th, 2000. Christine Shannon and Heidi Hart from Seattle are close friends. They've bought tickets for a ferry ride to the island of Paros, 166 kilometers to the southeast.
Express, Sabina?
Express sounds good. How long?
Christine's 32 and teaches preschool. Heidi's 26 and just graduated from college. She wants to go into business management. It's been a crazy kind of day. They'd planned on going to the island of Santorini, further south.
I have it. Okay, let's go.
We have to hurry.
Now I have the tickets. Let's go.
We'd been enjoying Athens the night before a little too much, and we overslept and missed our Santorini boat.
I had never heard of Paros. I even asked them, well, show me on a map where the island is, and then I said, never mind, it doesn't matter, let's just go. It's the next boat, let's go somewhere. So it was a fluke that we were on that boat.
Here's where chance is steering them. It could be a whole lot worse. If you dream of a Greek getaway, Paros is just what the guidebooks promise. Life is laid back, and the backdrop is enchanting. Around 12,000 people live on Paros year-round. In tourist season, add to that 100,000 visitors. Ferries from Athens head for the harbor in the main town, Parikia. There's constant traffic back and forth to the mainland. As one boat's leaving, another one shows up, bringing hundreds more eager visitors. Christine and Heidi are among 472 passengers who board the Samina today. As they get ready to embark, one thing becomes clear. Some of the boats on the island's run are modern, newly built. But the Samina comes from a different era. She's been crisscrossing the Mediterranean since 1966. The Samina was launched before these two were born. And though they don't realize it, Greek safety laws say that in little over a year, the Samina will be pulled out of service and sent to the scrapyard.
I made a few jokes to Christine about the lifeboats don't look very safe if we get into trouble out here. I said, we'll be screwed.
And I said, well, there's no icebergs in the Aegean, so we should be okay.
The Samina can carry more than 1,000 passengers, along with her 61 crew. So today, the ship's less than half full. Katrina Stark and her cousin Sarah Davis, both from New Zealand, are backpacking.
So that means we have to be headed
Like Heidi and Christine, they're literally sailing into the unknown.
Paris.
We had no plans. We went to get on the very first ferry that was leaving, going wherever it was going to take us, and that happened to be first stop Paris.
At 7:15, 2 hours into the journey, the sun is setting. There are still 3 hours to kill before the Samina arrives. The sports fans on board, passengers and crew, know just how they'd like to spend the time. There's a major soccer game playing live on TV. Athens star side Panathinaikos are up against their German rivals, Hamburg.
The reception wasn't very good, and so they had various staff come along trying to fix the TV, and everyone was putting suggestions to how to fix the TV, and it seemed to be quite important to everybody on board that they get to see this game.
At 8 p.m., the Samina passes the island of Kithnos. They're on schedule to reach Paros at around 10:15. The wind is rising, the sea is growing rougher, but these northerly winds, known as the Meltemi, are frequent at this time of year. The Samina has weathered conditions much worse than this over the past 3 decades.
I'm gonna take a nap!
Heidi and Christine are the only people left outside. They think their tickets don't allow them to go in.
Wake me when we're there!
I said, we have third-class tickets. We have to stay out on the deck. It's going to be a cold, wet, terrible night. But I didn't even think to go downstairs where most of the people on the boat were.
For the crew of the Samina, the nighttime journey is routine. Hazards such as reefs and rocks are all clearly marked on their charts. Many have warning lights. 2 jagged outcrops rise from the sea within sight of the main harbor on Paros, Perikia Bay. Known as the Portes, or the Gates, they lie 5.5 kilometers from the town. For every mariner sailing these waters, the Gates of Paros are a familiar landmark. They're welcoming, but dangerous too. The rocks rise 25 meters out of the sea. Every passing ship must give them a wide clearance. At night, a beacon light on the taller of the 2 rocks sends a clear warning to sailors. Stray too close to the Gates of Paros, and disaster will follow. They're still 2 hours away. But they're sailing into a growing storm. Despite the weather, Christine and Heidi are still out in the open.
Had I known we could go to any other part of the boat at that point in time, I would have. But I didn't know, and actually being in that part of the boat, I think, was very fortuitous for us because we were able to be aware of what was going on later.
Being out on the deck will help save their lives. Soon, everyone aboard will be fighting for survival. On the evening of September the 26th, 2000, The passenger ferry Express Samina leaves Athens Harbour, Piraeus, heading southeast. She's making for the island of Paros, 5 hours away in the Aegean Sea. As the sun sets, the weather deteriorates until by nightfall the ship is being buffeted by a northerly gale. But the crew are used to such conditions. Their ship is big enough, tough enough to survive far worse. The Samina is 115 meters long, more than a soccer field, and 18 meters wide. Passengers are widely dispersed. Heidi and Christine are out on the open deck. Katrina and Sarah are inside the main passenger lounge. The nerve center is here, the engine room. It's below the waterline, but is protected by a series of watertight doors. The crew need to move about, but the ship is safe so long as they lock the doors tight behind them. To reduce the rolling effect of the waves, the ship also has a stabilizing system, like small wings that extend out into the water. It's still a bumpy ride, but it doesn't stop passengers moving about when they want to.
As we got further away and night began to fall, the seas got rougher and it became stormy until it got to the point where you couldn't even walk on board. You had to kind of stumble sideways. People were kind of laughing. It was kind of funny at the time.
Being from a place where we ride ferries quite often, it wasn't really a concern to us at the time, but it was pretty rough out there.
It's 10 p.m. The wind has now risen to nearly 50 kilometers an hour. Waves are cresting 2 meters high. Despite the gale, visibility is good. Those are the lights of Paros. The Samina's on time and still pushing forward at 33 kilometers an hour. Then suddenly, the ship lurches sharply to the left.
What's that? Oh,
The boat turned enough that it startled me awake, and I woke up and was kind of dazed a little bit.
You can't just park a boat like you're parking a car, and so I thought it was odd that I felt this G-force of the boat turning.
Christine said, "Hey, there's lights. I see shore. We must be getting pretty close to docking."
The lights of Parikia, even car headlights, are clearly visible just 5.5 kilometers away. But then another light cuts through the darkness.
This rock just comes out of nowhere, just out of the black night. And I'll never forget what it looks like in my mind. It was, you know, this brown, kind of craggly, sandish looking rock that had lights on top of it shining down so it illuminated it. And it made it look like a movie set. The side of the boat scraped along the side. I could have walked over and touched it. And you could hear down in the lower decks of the boat that the metal was just ripping apart.
The unthinkable has happened. The Samina has crashed against the gates of Paros. 1 million kilos of ship grind against the rocks.
It was the worst sound, and it was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard, just God's fingernail on the biggest chalkboard in the world.
There was a hole, and it was gonna sink, and it was gonna sink fast.
The shockwave reverberates through the ship.
Suddenly there was a big lurch to the right side of the boat, and people who were standing up got thrown off their feet. Everything in the bar smashed. I looked out the window and there were 2 large rocks went past that looked white, lit up by the light inside the ship.
I don't know what that was. Oh, man, it just doesn't sound good, you know?
In a situation like this, the time frame is so hard to put back together. But it seemed like maybe a minute or two until the boat started to noticeably lilt to the side and tip. And that's kind of when the chaos started.
Get out of this place!
Am I supposed to run too fast? Get off this ship!
Lots of people were crying, lots of people were praying, holding on to each other, yelling. There was no alarm or siren, there was no one to tell us what we were supposed to do.
We need to get off this boat and we need to leave right now! We don't have to panic!
Christine said to me, the Titanic took hours to sink. And I said, we don't have that much time.
We don't have hours, Christine! We need to leave now! Okay.
In my mind, I thought, this boat's gonna sink and we're all gonna die.
All these people trying to get life jackets. Being taller, I was able to reach over the heads of most people who were trying to get hold of life jackets and grab two.
The Samina has 61 crew members, but where are they? Passengers must fend for themselves.
So I yelled to Christine, come here, I think I found life vest.
Hey, just open up! Just take it out!
At this point, people were starting to run past us. And I was saying, here, take these, and throwing them out, and people were just panicking.
Within minutes of the collision, the ship's lights go out. Passengers are plunged into darkness until emergency generators kick in.
And then the first flare went off. This eerie red glow coming down over the ferry gave it a whole nother feeling of just terror that we're out in the night, in the dark, and the ferry's gonna sink.
At the harbour, port officials are now aware of the developing crisis. Port Authority Vice Commander Dimitrios Malamas starts to organize a rescue. He needs all available boats right now.
What vessels do we have in the area?
Alexis Bisbas runs a yacht charter business in Parakia.
The first I heard of the disaster was a phone call that I got from the port police at about 10:15. Can I get out there with my boat as quickly as possible just to help with whatever might be necessary? And there was no way that we had any idea that it was going to be a disaster of that magnitude.
Paros has a medical center equipped for the islanders' basic needs, not a major disaster. Dr. John Polyzoides was an ER surgeon for 35 years. Though retired, he helps run the center.
We saw the ship was going down, and there were a lot of boats and lights and so on. I personally did not expect anything tragic to come out of that because we were so close also to the harbor.
Aboard the Samina, many of the 472 passengers are in a state of sheer terror.
It was chaos. It was people not knowing what to do and waiting for a captain or a crew to help us.
There was a woman who went through the door just before us, and she, as soon as she got out onto the deck, she climbed over the railings and just jumped off, like didn't look back or didn't say anything to anybody, and just climbed over and threw herself off into the water.
There was people holding children over the railings, wanting to throw them down to people in the water. It was quite a terrible scene.
The wind hampers efforts to abandon ship.
They were releasing inflatable life rafts. They weren't attached to the ship, so as soon as it was released, it was in a big storm, it would get picked up by the wind as soon as it was inflated, and they were just blowing halfway to Athens.
The rafts blow beyond the reach of many passengers who've already leapt into the sea. In the confusion, Heidi Hart is knocked flying, striking her head.
I kept thinking, if I black out now, I'm done for. This boat's sinking. I have to stay conscious. I had this adrenaline rush, and there was, a feeling that I would call terror. I knew instantly this was going to be a fight for our lives.
There was some point in time where I literally felt myself leave my body and instincts kicked in.
Everybody was running to the rear of the boat, and Christine just looked at me and said,
"Go that way, to the front of the boat." And she said, "But nobody's up there." It was the darkest part of the boat. It was the highest part of the boat. She said, "Nobody's up there." I said, "I don't care, go."
And luckily for us, that's where we found a lifeboat hanging over the side of the ship.
Heidi and Christine have escaped the sinking ship, but they're still at the mercy of the storm.
When we jumped into the lifeboat, it wasn't orderly, here's your seat. It was jump. Where you land is where you are, and so we were just kind of all pig-piled in this lifeboat together.
The battle for survival takes an ugly turn. Each passenger must decide, help others or fend for themselves.
There was 5 or 6 men in the back of the boat, and they were fighting with each other. They were yelling at each other. As the ferry was sinking, they kept pointing at the ferry and fighting with each other. And then, you know, this is when I see the guy swimming up to the boat, and so I started getting ready. I'm thinking, okay, I need a rope. I gotta throw him something. He has no life vest on. The only thing you could see was his eyes and his nose coming out of the water, and he was just barely making it, swimming towards us.
Everybody else on the boat was yelling, "No, no, we can't take any more people on."
I've got you, don't worry! I've got you!
Now Heidi leaned over and grabbed this gentleman's hand, and I reached over and grabbed her by the waist, and she told me, "I'm not letting go," and I yelled to the other people, "She's not letting go."
He had taken off almost all of his clothes. He was wearing just his underwear. I mean, I'm not a very big person. I'm 5 feet tall. Just me trying to pull him in the boat wasn't gonna work.
The men in the lifeboat realize that Heidi won't let go and finally help haul the drowning man on board.
I don't know what they were thinking. They were panicking. So, I mean, who am I to judge what other people were thinking and doing? But there was a lot more that could have been done that night.
Of the 533 people who set out on the Samina, many are now in the sea. Others are still trapped on the vessel itself. The ship begins to roll over. If it goes down, dozens of people will be dragged down with it. The passenger ferry Express Samina has struck rocks near the island of Paros in the Aegean Sea. 533 passengers and crew face a battle to survive in high winds and stormy seas. Some people have managed to clamber into a lifeboat. Others have stayed with the ship and now fear it will sink beneath them.
At that stage, we were on the deck trying to figure out whether it was a good idea to jump overboard as well. But we were tilting further and further, and it was getting to the point where we didn't really have that choice anymore.
It's 10:50, 40 minutes after the collision.
Sarah! Are you looking at me?
As the Samina continues to roll, Katrina Stark has little choice. She hauls herself over the rail. The ship has turned completely on its side. Katrina is sitting on the hull. Should she try to swim for shore or wait for rescue?
While I was sitting there thinking about that, all of a sudden the ship just sank underneath us and sucked us down and everything around it. I don't know how much time we were under the water, but I had enough time to think, okay, well, this is the part where I die. This is the part where I drown. I kind of thought, well, okay, that's fine, and had enough time to be okay with that.
Just as we got there, we saw the ferry sinking, which was an extreme sight.
And to see this entire ship sink beneath the waves and to be gone and just leave us in our little lifeboat it was amazing. It was almost beautiful in a sad sort of way.
And then complete blackness, darkness, huge waves.
The Samina sinks 2.5 kilometers from the gates of Paros. Even without its engines, wind, waves, and the ship's own momentum carry the Samina closer to the shore. The sea here is 38 meters deep. As the Samina goes down, huge bubbles of air escape from the ship, making the water less dense, making objects in the water sink more quickly. Katrina Stark sinks several meters before the buoyancy of her life jacket pulls her up again.
As suddenly as I had been sucked under, suddenly I popped out the top.
Her priority now is to find her cousin, Sarah. In the storm, she can't tell where she is.
The waves were so big that for 1 second it sounded like she was over there, and so I tried to swim that way, and then the next second it sounded like, oh, she's over there. I tried to swim that way.
Sarah! Sarah! I can hear you, but I can't see you! Sarah! Sarah!
Eventually I just said to her, okay, make sure that you get on a boat and get back to land, and I will see you back on shore.
At 11:15 p.m., Dr. Polyzoides receives his first casualty of the night, but something doesn't add up.
They brought a man on a stretcher. He was semi-conscious, and then we started working on him. He had hardly any blood pressure, and when we were resuscitating him, I realized that he was dry, which it meant that he didn't actually, he was not from the ship. Anyway, we carried on. Eventually, we lost him. He died in our hands. And then people came and he said, you know who it was? And I said, no.
His patient isn't from the Samina, but the disaster still claims its first victim. The man is Dimitrios Malamas, who'd been helping organize the rescue. In the crisis, he'd suffered a heart attack. He was 40 years old.
So you can understand, even at this early stage, although we did not know the number of people that were going to lose, there was that sense of tragedy immediately from the very beginning.
A local shopkeeper, George Skandalis, grabs his video camera and captures these first raw images as survivors begin to appear.
As soon as we got close enough to shore, and when I saw this white cathedral with the blue dome top, that was when I finally knew we made it. We're gonna get to shore, we're gonna be alive.
I felt more alive than I've ever felt in my life. Giddy, almost giddy. And actually afterwards, one of the things that I had to come to terms with was that people died and I felt so alive.
One of the local fishing boats now appears, crowded with people who've been dragged from the sea. Local boat owner Alexis Bisbas is part of the rescue flotilla searching for survivors.
1 minute we were flying across the top of a wave, the next minute we were burying the bow of the boat into the previous wave. We had water coming across the decks. I've been sailing all my life. I've never had a situation like that. I never want to be in that situation ever again because it was terrifying.
He plucks 25 people from the sea in 3 trips out into the stormy waters.
One of the amazing things in these situations is the way that people behave. A young man, we pulled out, he was still carrying his portable stereo system. So the one hand's trying to grab hold of the boat, and the other hand, as we realized, was being hampered by this stereo system that he still had in his other hand. One of them was an old lady who had tied to her life jacket her bag. As we were trying to drag her into the boat, we realized that something was stopping her, and I went to cut her free of this bag, and she said to us that if we did, we should throw her back because that was her entire life in this bag.
Many survivors are in a state of shock. All are cold, wet, and exhausted. Just a few hundred meters away, dozens of people are still in the water, trying to stay alive until they're spotted by a rescue boat. Katrina Stark and a fellow survivor, a total stranger, are now clinging desperately to a piece of wreckage.
My first surprise about being in the water was that it was warm. I was really expecting the water to be cold. They were big waves, and you just had to cling on tight to the piece of wreckage. Not too far away from us was an older Greek woman who couldn't swim. And she was panicking and was screaming and yelling, trying to get someone to come and save her. And the guy that I was with was saying she's going to want to come over to us, and if she grabs hold of us, she's going to drag us down.
Keep her away! She'll kill us both together!
She had kind of wild eyes, like she was clearly panicking. And a big wave came and washed over her, and she didn't come back up out of the water. She had drowned.
There are still some signs of hope. Some people have been pushed south by the wind. Miraculously avoiding being smashed onto the rocks, they've wound up on a sandy beach, the Bay of St. Irene. A life raft beaches in the same spot. They're safe now, but the terror these little children have gone through is hard to comprehend. More than 400 survivors have now wound up on the dockside. Many have suffered a terrifying ordeal in the water. They're rushed to the medical center, where Dr. Polyzoides has now assembled a team of 15 medics. Some doctors and nurses based on the island, others tourists who've come in to assist.
Between 11:30 and 12, the first drowned was brought in on a stretcher. And although I worked for 35 years as an accident surgeon, it was a horrible experience. And that was the beginning of the horrific feeling which I had that this is serious now.
At midnight, after an hour in the water, Katrina Stark is brought to shore.
We were the last people that they were able to bring up onto the boat. And they headed back for the harbour. And on the way, they stopped a couple of times to pick people up, but they would go to pick them up and realise that they were dead, and so they'd just leave them where they were.
Katrina doesn't know if her cousin made it.
Sarah? Katrina?
I was just never been so happy to see anybody in my whole life. And I just grabbed hold of her and wouldn't leave her side for a second.
To see you. Oh, you are you okay? Are you keeping warm? Yeah.
It was terrifying. I mean, it's been 5 years since the accident, and I still have nightmares. I still think about it. It will still make me cry.
You guys have had quite a shock being in the water.
It was traumatic, and it was very scary, but it was also a singularly defining moment in my life where I was able to use all of the resources I had to survive.
I think we've got him! Pull, 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 pull!
I don't think I would have chosen not to live through this.
At midnight, more than 2 hours after the collision, the rescue operation is becoming more and more a search for bodies.
When you start seeing the bodies in the sea, somebody that I knew that an hour ago they were breathing, and suddenly they're dead, and it was very distressing. I mean, it took me a very long time to put it out of my mind. It was very difficult.
25 people are now confirmed dead. As victims continue to arrive, Dr. Polyzoides is overwhelmed.
Do I go to this room and try and save someone? Do I wait and see whether it's worth saving? And it was like a catastrophe. It was as if it was coming the end of the world to this island. So it was almost like you're seeing a movie that's not happening to you. Every half an hour, the number of bodies increased.
By 2:30 a.m., the number of dead reaches 60. There's no room for so many bodies in the medical center. The Church of St. Nicholas on the waterfront now becomes a temporary morgue. The search for people, alive or dead, continues right through the night. Very soon, investigators will begin to ask tough questions. Who's to blame for the sinking? Why did so many people have to die? The passenger ferry Express Samina has sunk in a storm in the Aegean Sea. Already 60 people are confirmed dead. Many more need medical treatment. Morning reveals the power of last night's storm. A lifeboat lies smashed to pieces on the rocks. Life rafts blew away, empty. A message board at the harborfront lists who's alive and who's still missing. Bodies will continue to wash up on the beaches for days to come. There aren't enough coffins on Paros. More arrive. Even the most experienced professionals are touched by the trauma.
I was so shaken by this that I didn't sleep for 2 nights, and on the 3rd night, where I went to sleep, I dreamt that my son was drowning.
Very quickly, the grief turns to anger. Where were the crew when the ship hit the rocks? Where were they when the passengers needed help? Rumors spread like wildfire and are picked up by the media. Were some members of the crew watching the soccer game on TV when they should have been steering the ship? The captain, 53-year-old Vasilis Giannakos, is held for questioning by the police. On Paros, the funerals begin. Here, a 4-year-old boy drowned with his father. Divers discover 10 bodies trapped inside the hull of the Samina. The last body is found floating 2 weeks after the sinking, 50 kilometers north of Paros. Altogether, 80 people have died, 75 passengers, 5 crew members. This is Greece's worst shipping disaster in more than 30 years, a national tragedy. In the bitter aftermath, the spotlight falls on the company which owned the Samina and its vice president, Pantelis Sphinias. He could face criminal charges, as well as multi-million-dollar compensation claims. 2 months after the sinking, police surround a body lying on the sidewalk outside company headquarters in Athens. Sphinias has jumped out of his 6th floor window, committing suicide. Maritime experts at the National Technical University of Athens begin an inquiry. Detailed testimony is gathered from 46 crew members, as well as 192 passengers. The Greek legal authorities want the university to give them a thorough explanation of what happened. Professor David Molyneux of the National Research Centre of Canada is one of the world's leading experts on ferry safety. He's studied the findings of the Greek investigators, who came up with a startling realization.
What they found at the inquiry defied some of the initial speculation concerning the age of the ship, and the accident, in fact, turned out to be caused by something completely different.
Testimony reveals each small but critical factor that together turn a routine ferry crossing into a national disaster. 3 hours into the journey, the crew switch on the ship's autopilot.
The autopilot is an electronic link between the compass and the rudder, correcting the rudder a little bit one way or the other to bring you back where you want to be.
Even on autopilot, a crew member should constantly monitor the ship's position.
It's bad practice to leave an autopilot unattended, particularly in bad weather, because the wind, the waves, and the current are all acting to drift the ship in one direction. And that kind of steady drift is not compensated for by the electronics in the autopilot.
As the weather grows worse, the crew deploy the ship's stabilizer system to make the ride more comfortable for the passengers. The stabilizer uses two small fins to counteract the roll of the ship. But something extraordinary has happened. Only the starboard or right-hand stabilizer fin has extended.
Very unusual. Normally we'd expect both stabilizers to be working at any one time. With just one stabilizer, the ship is no longer symmetrical, so the flow around the ship is unbalanced, and as a result, the ship will tend to drift one way rather than go in a straight line.
With only the starboard stabilizer, the Samina is pulled slowly but surely to the right. It's a deadly malfunction. Captains aim to stay at least 740 meters left of the gates of Paros. But when the Samina arrives, she's on collision course. A crew member makes a last-minute attempt to steer the ship to the left, but the ship can't turn quickly enough.
It was very unfortunate the ship got holed, but there was really no reason why the ship should have sank. The damage was within the range that you would normally expect a ship to survive.
The east face of the taller pinnacle is where the ship strikes, at 12 minutes past 10 p.m. There's a 6-meter lengthways gash, as long as a telephone pole, and 1 meter wide. But this hole is well above the waterline. No water should enter the ship. Moments later, a second impact. The stabilizer fin bends backwards. It stabs like a dagger through the ship's side. This 3-meter gash is below the waterline. Even worse, it's exactly alongside the engine room. The main generators are knocked out. Electrical power is cut throughout the ship. The investigating team orders divers to make a detailed survey of the wreck of the Samina. Inside, they discover the final piece of the puzzle. Even with 2 large holes, the ship could have been saved. One final error sealed the fate of the Samina. The passenger ferry Express Samina strikes rocks near the Greek island of Paros. With 2 gaping holes in her starboard side, she capsizes and sinks in 38 meters of water. Divers go down to survey the wreck and make a startling discovery. Like all large seagoing ships, the Samina is divided into separate compartments, sealed by watertight doors like this one. Safety laws insist they remain locked while the ship's at sea. On the Samina's last journey, some of the doors were open.
If you imagine in your house, every time you went through a door from the kitchen, you had to close it, lock it, move on to the living room, open that door, close it, lock it, and carry on. It really does slow down your everyday life. So there is a tendency sometimes to leave these doors open.
Because they're left open, water is no longer confined to the engine room. And now that the power is cut, the crew can't close the doors remotely. "29 of the crew are called back for a second grilling by investigators. This testimony provides an exact picture of the ship's last moments, data which is now built into a computer model. At 10:15, 3 minutes after the collision, the ship is listing only 5 degrees to the right. but filling fast through that hole in the engine room. By 10:25, she's listing 14 degrees. Now the 6-meter gash, which was above the waterline, is exposed to the sea. This is the point where the Samina and 80 of those on board are doomed. The ship can't withstand this degree of damage. The Samina is what's called a ro-ro ferry. It stands for roll on, roll off. This is a modern ro-ro ship. Vehicles simply reverse in through the stern doors and then drive out at their destination. It's a cost-effective design with a potentially fatal flaw. The worst shipping disasters in recent times have involved vessels designed this way. The Herald of Free Enterprise went down with the loss of 193 lives at Zeebrugge in Belgium in 1987. 850 were drowned aboard the ro-ro ferry Estonia in the Baltic Sea in 1994. Unlike a cruise ship or a cargo vessel, which are divided into many smaller compartments, the vehicle deck of a ro-ro ship is one large open area, highly vulnerable to rapid flooding.
Imagine comparing flooding an egg box with flooding just an empty cardboard shoebox. The shoebox would tend to fill up very, very quickly, whereas an egg box would tend to fill up each compartment at a time, and so the egg box would stay afloat, whereas the shoebox wouldn't.
This open space is especially vulnerable because it's so close to the waterline.
The car deck on a ro-ro ferry is low to make driving the vehicles on and off easy. As a result, you're relying on those watertight compartments to keep the ship afloat in the event of damage.
By 10:29, the Samina is listing 23 degrees. She's now tilting so much that it's impossible to launch more lifeboats. Only 3 of the 8 she carried got away. 3 minutes later, at 10:32, she's listing 33 degrees. At around 10:50, the ship turns completely on her side.
We know the exact time that the ship sank because the clock on the bridge was stopped at 2 minutes past 11.
Divers surveying the wreck make their most important discovery. Of the ship's 11 watertight doors, 9 were left open.
And the most important aspect of this accident was leaving the watertight doors open. As a result, the ship flooded, lost all its reserve of buoyancy, and eventually sank.
If the doors had been locked, despite the navigational error which put the ship on the rocks, despite the hole in the engine room, this would probably have been a survivable accident. The trial of ship's captain Vasilis Giannakos and 7 others began in May 2005, more than 4 years after the disaster. The sinking of the Samina led to safety improvements. Greece cut the maximum working life of passenger ferries from 35 to 30 years. The tragedy also helped speed the introduction of voyage recorders, like an airplane black box. They're now mandatory in all passenger ferries. Some good came out of bad. For the first time since those dramatic events, Katrina Stark has come back to Paros. It's an emotional return.
It was a pretty traumatic thing to go through, but it's quite a character-building experience, and I think it plays a large part in who I am today.
For their role in helping to save lives, Heidi Hart and Christine Shannon were given an award for heroism by the city of Seattle.
I understand my strength a lot more, and I can live freely without the restraints of being scared of what's unknown, because life is an unknown.
Even for a heroine, it's tough to look back.
Christine and I, we always say we were the lucky ones. We were in the right place at the right time, and that is the only thing I can think of why we made it and so many other people didn't. And it breaks my heart.
US 737 is in trouble. The pilots blinded by rain. In the cabin, government officials and influential businessmen. The crash of IFO-21 shocks the world. Did a final act of war bring the plane down? The White House demands answers. This was no ordinary flight, but a military jet carrying American politicians. When the investigation is over, the Air Force itself is held responsible. Wednesday, April the 3rd, 1996. A raw spring day near the city of Dubrovnik, Croatia. Rain pelts the runway at the city's airport. A small group of diplomats hurry through the storm, trying to keep dry. They're part of a delegation that's just touched down. Among them, the Croatian Prime Minister and the American ambassador to the region, Peter Galbraith.
The flight into Dubrovnik was a scary flight. We couldn't see anything at all. At that point, I'd been ambassador to Croatia for nearly 3 years, and I'd done a lot of shuttle diplomacy, and it certainly was one of the most uncomfortable.
The weather that made Galbraith's landing so bad isn't letting up. In fact, commercial flights into Dubrovnik have been cancelled. But the ambassador and the others aren't waiting for a commercial flight. They're here to greet IFO-21, a US Air Force jet on a delicate mission. The plane is a specially designed 737. The Air Force has a small fleet of these jets to transport high-profile guests around the world. The cabin has everything needed to do business and politics 10,000 meters in the sky. Today, the cabin is filled with what the military call DVs, Distinguished Visitors. This group is led by United States Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown.
Ron Brown was a very smooth, capable individual. He was a Washington insider. And he had all the skills that go with that.
Brown is a star in the Democratic Party.
I obviously will do everything that is possible.
He played an important role in getting Bill Clinton elected president. Under Clinton, Brown was appointed the first African-American Commerce Secretary in the country's history.
The United States companies that are here today are eager to engage in dialogue with government and business leaders, and more importantly, to do business.
Today, that job has taken Brown to one of the most troubled areas in the world. For 4 years, civil war ripped Bosnia and Croatia apart. But just a few months ago, an uneasy peace began. As Commerce Secretary, Brown is helping to rebuild the local economy.
Ambassador thinks we should.
The philosophy behind it was that the peace would not be durable unless there was economic progress in the region, that was really critical to the peace.
Brown's 3-day tour started that morning in Tuzla, Bosnia, where the group toured an electrical plant and ate hamburgers with American troops stationed there.
Being a former Army man myself, I know what being away from home is like, so we thought we would bring a little bit of home to you.
The final stop on today's tour is the ancient coastal city of Dubrovnik. Before the war, it was a vital part of the country's tourism industry.
It was my idea that Ron Brown should go to Dubrovnik. The Croatians were very eager to get the word out that Dubrovnik was still standing and that it was still a tourist destination. So I thought it would be very useful to have Ron Brown and the delegation go there.
But on this damp day, Dubrovnik is not at its best, or even visible. Fog presses down from the sky, obscuring the city and the beautiful Adriatic coast. To the north of Dubrovnik flies IFO 21. Its pilot is Captain Ashley J. Davis. His colleagues call him AJ.
Departure, IFO 21.
IFO 21.
From the cockpit, Davis can see some clouds ahead that he wants to avoid.
I'm left here just a couple of miles for a build-up.
IFO 21, this is approved as requested. Climb and maintain flight level 160.
Up to 160 now. IFO 21.
It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. AJ Davis and his crew have been on the go since dawn. While the cabin of this plane is built for comfort, the cockpit is virtually identical to a standard issue 737. AJ Davis grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and dreamed of being a pilot. He made it and has been on the front line of American military efforts. In the past, he flew mid-air refuelers high above the Persian Gulf. But now he pilots diplomats and other officials from around the world. It means a lot of traveling and a lot of time away from his wife and 2 children at Ramstein, an American base in Germany. According to the Air Force ranks, Shelley Kelly is a technical sergeant. Today on IFO 21, her main job is to make sure the passengers have everything they need.
Mr. Secretary, something to eat.
No, thank you. I was wondering how our time's
The
looking.
diplomats are expecting to arrive in Dubrovnik by mid-afternoon, but they've been running late all day.
I can check to find out for sure if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. Early would be good.
As the plane nears Dubrovnik, AJ Davis calls the United States Air Force Weather Service for an update.
Metro, IFO 21, how copy? Over.
IFO 21, copy loud and clear. Weather for Lima Delta uniform as follows. Rain. Sky conditions 500, broken. That would be ceiling. How well do you copy?
Metro, IFO 21, copies. Yeah, we've been in it all day. Are you expecting any changes in the weather?
Pretty much continued rain, over.
Copy. Rain. Thanks for your help. So, let's see the sights at Dubrovnik.
Only 4 months after a peace treaty was signed, the skies over this part of the world aren't guaranteed to be friendly. Planes are still required to fly in certain highly restricted lanes. While he's aware that there are flight restrictions, Davis has never flown in this part of the world before. As he nears the Croatian border, he gets an unexpected warning.
IFO 21, this is Magic 51.
Magic is the call sign for the peacekeeping airborne early warning aircraft that watches air corridors like a traffic cop.
Be advised, you're leaving an approved corridor. Please reroute immediately.
Davis isn't off course. He's flying the exact route he had planned. But without knowing it, Davis and his plane are flying out of approved airspace. They're flying into potentially dangerous territory.
You're leaving an approved corridor. Reroute.
Roger, Magic. Our error. Rerouting now to proper corridor. Over. The second time today.
The approved corridors do change, and Davis and his crew should have been informed. To stay on an approved course, Davis will have to swing out to the west. It's an embarrassing situation that's going to cost them time.
Shelley, AJ, we've been directed to reroute. We'll be arriving about 15 minutes late at Dubrovnik. Apologies to all back there.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention, please? Unfortunately, there will be a slight delay on our arrival into Dubrovnik.
DVs aren't going to be happy at all. The weather ahead will probably slow us down even more.
Outside his plane, the heavy rain continues to crash down. Flying toward an unfamiliar airport with a cabin full of businessmen and diplomats, Davis has a difficult task ahead. What happens to this plane and its passengers over the next several hours will capture the attention of the world. A heavy rain soaks a small airport in Dubrovnik, Croatia. Headed towards it is a US Air Force 737 carrying 35 people on a trade mission. Leading the delegation, US Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown.
We'll see which path Ambassador thinks we should follow.
Dubrovnik approach, IFO 21, level 100.
Dubrovnik approach, good afternoon. Maintain 10,000 feet for beacon approach. Runway 12.
Okay, descending to 10,000 feet, IFO 21.
The weather is so bad today that commercial flights have been cancelled. As they approach the airport, the rain isn't letting up. But the crew is dealing with more than just bad weather. The recent civil war has taken a heavy toll on Dubrovnik's airport. It had been closed for several years and is waiting for a new landing system.
The airport was totally trashed by the Serbs who had taken over the airport during the '91 war. They really went out of their way for the destruction. They destroyed the instrument landing system. The new one was on order.
Around the world, airports use sophisticated technology to help planes take off and land. Doppler radar warns of incoming storms. Glide slopes help pilots stay on course to land. The devastated Dubrovnik airport has none of that. It doesn't even have radar to see the planes that are coming in for landing. Instead, the airport is using so-called non-directional beacons to guide planes towards the runway. In the aviation world, it's ancient technology.
There are many non-directional beacons used in the United States and throughout the world, but they're an older navigational aid, and in fact, they were on the way out.
The system in Dubrovnik has 2 beacons on the ground, which send out signals to the plane. When the crew receives the signals, they consult their charts and follow the course that will take them to the airport. The crew of IFO 21 is still waiting to hear the first signal when they get a call from the ground.
9A CRO to IFO 21.
IFO 21, I read you, 9A CRO, over.
Another plane, this one carrying Ambassador Galbraith, had touched down earlier in Dubrovnik. The pilot of that plane is an experienced flyer who's very familiar with the area. He wants to let the crew know what to expect.
IFO 21, we landed about an hour ago. The weather was at minimum.
Adjusting the wording to split if you have to execute the missed approach. Over.
Roger, 9A CRO, we read you. Out.
Diverting wouldn't be welcome news for the members of the trade delegation.
The pressures to get the passengers to scheduled news conferences and other activities were probably pretty high.
As Davis closes in on the airport, the Dubrovnik Tower calls again.
IFO 21. Report level.
IFO 21, 5,000.
IFO 21, roger. Descend to 4,000. Report Kilo Lima Papa.
Down to 4,000, IFO 21.
Sir. Thank you.
Flying above the storm, the crew finally hears the radio signal from the first beacon.
Hey, Gage. At Kilo Lima Papa, we're tracking outbound at 119 degrees.
119 confirmed.
Mr. Secretary, we're landing.
We'll take this up later, Adam.
It's not very broken up down there. I can't see through it. Tim?
The clouds are thick. The crew can't see the ground. They have to trust their instruments as they descend through the storm.
IFO 21. Sir, we are inside the locator, inbound.
IFO 21, roger. Cleared for beacon approach. Runway is wet.
IFO 21.
A.J. Davis flies blind through heavy rain and cloud cover. He expects to see the airport any second.
IFO 21, do you read?
Just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Dubrovnik Tower loses all contact with IFO 21.
IFO 21, Dubrovnik approach, do you read? IFO 21, do you read?
Without approach radar to track the plane, controllers have no idea where it is. Perhaps the plane has diverted to another airport.
IFO 21, do you read?
But as the minutes stretch on with no word from the American plane, local controllers are taking no chances.
Initiate emergency procures.
Near the end of our shift, we heard about the possibility of a missing plane. We didn't know who was on the plane. We had no details about the flight. For situations like this, there is a certain procedure, and we just waited for more information.
Peter Galbraith is waiting at the airport with Croatia's Prime Minister.
It was clear from my own flight in that this was a very marginal landing. I did not expect them to attempt the landing in Dubrovnik. The Croatian Prime Minister came up to me and pulled me aside. He said, "We've lost radio contact with Ron Brown's plane." I got the State Department Operations Center on the phone, and he's asked to activate the U.S. military to start search and rescue activities.
Word goes out to the chain of air traffic control centers.
Američke borbene snage. Jeste li imali nekakav kontakt sa tim zrakoplovom?
But no one has had any contact with IFO 21. The search and rescue effort focuses on the approach to the airport. Perhaps the plane had ditched into the Adriatic.
At the time, I was about 100 miles away. I was in Brindisi, Italy. We launched 2 of our MH-53 helicopters with Special Tactics Air Force personnel on board, headed to Dubrovnik.
For hours, there is no sign of the missing aircraft. The weather conditions are getting worse.
Fog was in, thunderstorms in the area, low visibility.
IFO-21 Dubrovnik approach, do you read?
IFO 21 has a CPI, or crash position indicator, on board.
IFO-21, do you read?
If the plane went down, the CPI should be sending out an ultra-high frequency signal.
IFO-21.
But the Dubrovnik airport, as well as lacking radar, does not have the equipment to pick up the signal.
IFO-21 Dubrovnik approach, do you read? IFO-21, do you read? IFO-21, do you read?
As the hours pass, poor visibility frustrates the searchers.
They arrived off the coast, and they were over water looking for the crash.
Hours after the plane disappears, police respond to a tip. A local villager has seen something on the hill above his house. It's a long way from the coast where the search is concentrated.
We went up with 2 vehicles to check the mountains. The weather was extremely horrible, strong rain and thick fog. So we went on foot for about an hour up that mountain. Then we came close.
It's almost 7:30 at night, 4.5 hours after the crew called for clearance to land. The crash of IFO 21 is finally confirmed. The news races from Dubrovnik to America.
The crash site has been reached by Croatian police, and I've just received word that there's also a Croatian doctor on the scene.
The tail section is the only substantial piece of IFO 21 that's left. Debris and bodies are scattered across the mountain.
These were hard moments as we were walking over the boulders, not knowing if we're going to step on someone's body. These are the moments that you can't forget.
Then, almost miraculously, police make a heartening discovery. Inside the tail section, they find a survivor. It's Technical Sergeant Shelley Kelly.
As we arrived at the tail section, one policeman went inside and found the body of a stewardess, and he tried to help. That was our hope. We wanted to help. We wanted to save every life, and hers was our chance. We were counting on it.
In the darkness, they realize that Kelly needs immediate medical attention if she's going to survive.
When I realized that there was no one to help, I radioed the police central station in Dubrovnik and got them the location of the crash site. By then, it was completely dark.
St. John's Hill is alive with close to 100 Croatian policemen and military. American forces are also rushing to the scene. Enormous rocks and treacherous conditions make the wreck site difficult to reach. But there are also remnants of the recent war. Mike Canavan is in charge of the US crash recovery operation.
I met a Croatian major. He told me that he was going to be the guide that would take us up to the top of the mountain. And at that time, he happened to mention that there were several minefields between where we were and the crash site.
It takes almost 2 hours for Canavan to finally make it up the rocky hill.
We had been walking for some time, and it was very dark. And all of a sudden, I saw something that was darker, and I didn't know what it was. And I reached out, and it was an aircraft engine.
On top of the hill, the weather is making it impossible for helicopters to land. Emergency workers can't wait for the weather to clear. They have to get Technical Sergeant Kelly off the mountain immediately. She has a broken spine and other severe injuries. But if she can be kept alive, rescuers hope she can shed some light on what went wrong. With Kelly off the mountain, the search for other survivors continues. Finally, in the darkness, rescue workers find the body of Ron Brown, the U.S. Commerce Secretary. In fact, as rescuers continue to comb the hillside, all they find are bodies. A.J. Davis and the rest of the crew were probably killed instantly. All the other members of the trade delegation are also killed. As dozens of emergency workers continue their grim search, a call comes from Dubrovnik. Technical Sergeant Shelley Kelly is pronounced dead in the ambulance en route to hospital. No one has survived the crash of IFO 21. A grim spring rain hammers down on the mountains of Croatia. Near the Dubrovnik airport, a 737 has crashed. The jet was an American Air Force's plane on a trade mission through the region. Police and members of the military have searched for survivors, but all 35 people who were on the flight are now dead. Including the American Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown. In the darkness, the rescuers begin a very different job. Mike Canavan is with the U.S. Special Forces.
Once we realized there were no survivors, the mission changes. It goes from there's no one to rescue. Now you have to recover remains.
By dawn, the weather has improved. Peter Galbraith gets his first glimpse of the crash site.
We walked up the mountain. The weather was somewhat better. And near the top, there was the fuselage of the plane, rear part of it, and debris all over the place. And then on the other side of the ridge were the bodies. There's nothing in the world that compares to a plane crash.
One thing that my folks did on the mountain and then down in Dubrovnik is they did this with dignity and respect. And I thought it was done exceptionally well.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President and the First Lady and the members of Cabinet and I wanted to come here to be with the employees of the Commerce Department at this very difficult hour. Hillary and I have just come from Ron Brown's home, visiting with Alma and Michael and their family and friends who are there.
As the truth sets in, the hard questions begin. How had a specially redesigned US Air Force 737 crashed on a hillside in Croatia? Was it simply bad weather? Or in a war-ravaged part of the world, was there another cause?
Purpose of the accident investigation team, I can guarantee you that they will be extremely thorough in their analysis in trying to determine the causes of this accident.
Because of the high-profile nature of the passengers, rumors begin swirling immediately. Howard Swansea is one of dozens of experts assigned to the team.
In every accident, there's always a lot of speculation. In this particular case, you had a high-ranking U.S. government official. And so by the time we had even got to the crash site, there was just quite a bit of media attention around it. And there were fragments, pieces of aircraft miles away from the wreckage. So my idea was to get as much information or collect as much artifacts or physical evidence as I could.
Right from the start, the investigation team is at a disadvantage. They discover that there's no cockpit voice recorder or flight data recorder on the plane. What's standard for passenger jets is not required in the Air Force.
I had assumed that the Air Force and these VIP flights had higher safety standards than commercial flights. And so I was really shocked to learn that the standards were generally lower than those for commercial aviation.
Without the standard tools, investigators can't afford to overlook anything. The wreck is almost 3 kilometers from the airport. How did a trained crew get so far off course? As Swansea examines the wreckage, Nelson Spornheimer is brought in to look at other evidence. An expert in aerial navigation, he plots the plane's doomed final minutes. To trace the last moments of the flight, he turns to the sky and the US Air Force radar plane, which had been patrolling the region.
IFO-21, this is Magic 5-1. Be advised, you're leaving an approved corridor. Please reroute immediately.
Rerouting now to proper corridor. Over.
Apart from heading out of approved airspace, Spornheimer finds nothing unusual about the plane's flight until the end.
The radar track that I was given was from an AWACS aircraft and showed that the en route portions of the flight from about 100 miles prior to the airport were entirely nominal.
The last segment of the flight, however, beginning 20 kilometers from the airport, is different. On their final approach, the plane begins to head off course. They start flying in a straight line, which heads right into the mountains.
My initial look at the flight track of the aircraft showed a 7-degree bearing error in the final segment of the approach.
A small error when traveling at hundreds of kilometers an hour could quickly lead to an enormous problem. But why would the plane get off course at the end of the trip if the rest of the flight showed no major navigational problems? Even in bad weather, how had the crew become so lost? Spornheimer examines the outdated navigational equipment at the airport. Badly damaged during the recent war, perhaps it had malfunctioned. 2 separate navigational beacons are used for landing in Dubrovnik. One guides planes to the runway, the other lets them know if they've gone too far. The first is located on nearby Kolosep Island. It transmits a specific Morse code signal to make it easily identifiable. When they hear it, all Davis and his crew need to do is fly a heading specified on their landing charts. If they do, they should eventually arrive at the airport. The second beacon is located at the airport itself. It's a fail-safe device. If the crew hears the beacon before they see the airport, they have to declare a missed approach and circle around to try landing again. In fact, the plane that brought Peter Galbraith to Dubrovnik just minutes before IFO-21 only landed on its second attempt.
IFO-21, I read you, 9ACRO, over.
Adjusting the verdict to
Split if you have to execute the missed approach.
over.
Roger, 9ACRO, we read you. Out.
But after studying the equipment, Spornheimer doesn't believe it played a role in the crash.
Both the non-directional beacons were found to be operating normally by flight tests within a few days after the accident.
There are bizarre rumors of an even more sinister theory. Perhaps Davis was following a decoy beacon put in the mountains on purpose. In a troubled region, was this an attack on the trade mission?
To get a signal that is strong enough to be heard, you have to have a very large ground system, which is difficult to establish in rocky, sandy soil. So it would be very expensive and very time-consuming to set up an NDB in the mountains.
Such an elaborate scheme would be nearly impossible to pull off. No evidence is ever found of a decoy beacon. The investigation continues. In the wreckage of the Air Force flight, investigators discover an important piece of the puzzle. The plane's ADF, or automatic direction finder, is recovered. It appears to be working, but only one of the units had been installed on this jet. To perform a proper landing in Dubrovnik, a plane requires 2 ADFs. The device listens to the signals put out by the land-based beacons, but it can only listen to one at a time.
We're still not past it. I'm tuned back to KLP.
Flying with 1 ADF, the crew can listen to either the beacon which is telling them how to get to the airport, or the beacon which is telling them they've gone too far. They can't do both at the same time.
That would have required 2 ADF receivers in the aircraft, which the accident aircraft had only 1. And only having 1 ADF restricted their ability to follow the approach accurately.
I got CV. We're still not past it. I'm tuning back to KLP.
By quickly tuning back and forth between the 2 beacons, the crew can use 1 ADF to listen to 2 signals. But it would have added stress to an already difficult landing. And it's another surprise. The Air Force jet wasn't adequately equipped to land at this airport.
You're talking in a very short time span of making the approach. It's going to become rather difficult in trying to dial both to keep listening to the code if you're also trying to search for your course and headings.
As he continues to study the path that IFO 21 took, Nelson Spornheimer focuses on an S-shaped curve in the plane's flight. It's the sort of path a plane would take when looking for a signal from a non-directional beacon. But just when the crew should be looking for the beacon signal, the S-turns disappear.
At about 2 or 3 miles inside the final approach fix, for the next 7 or 8, 9 miles, the flight track is perfectly straight.
Instead of trusting the navigational system that was in place, even though it was primitive, the crew suddenly seems to give up. And Spornheimer thinks he knows why. Fighting heavy rain and hampered by a single direction finder, Spornheimer believes the crew resorted to another, even older piece of technology to find the runway, something called INS, or Inertial Navigation System.
An INS system uses gyroscopes to maintain an awareness of how much the airplane turns and banks.
After entering a specific geographical position at the beginning of a flight, an inertial navigation system tracks all the turns a plane makes. It's a self-contained system on the aircraft. But there is a potentially enormous problem. If the gyroscopes don't perfectly calculate every single maneuver of the plane, a pilot can be off course.
It's not very broken up down there. I can't see through it. Tim?
The crew might have thought that switching to this system would help them find their way. But in this case, it might have put the plane dangerously off course.
INS drift in this case was probably, in my view, the primary reason the aircraft ended up where it was.
Investigator Howard Swansea examines the Jeppson approach chart the crew was using as they attempted to land. Hampered by poor visibility and relying on the inertial navigation system, their charts would have been a key aid. But when he takes a closer look at it, he notices something peculiar. A key figure, the minimum descent altitude, isn't accurate. The minimum descent altitude is the height where pilots must be able to see the airport. If you can't see it at that height, you have to abort the landing.
Each country has the responsibility of developing these procedures and then publishing information so that other nationalities as well as their own air crews can fly those approach procedures.
Swansea discovers that the minimum descent altitude on the chart doesn't meet American aviation standards. Given the mountainous terrain, it should have been more than 2,800 feet. But the chart the crew was using said it was just over 2,100 feet. It means that the crew could have flown almost 700 feet lower than experts in the US thought was safe without having to abort the landing. Combined with the other problems the crew was dealing with, the non-standard chart sealed their fate. Struggling to find the airport, they were straining to see through the clouds, assuming they were still safely above the mountains. But why wasn't an Air Force jet properly equipped to land in Dubrovnik? And why didn't the crew have the right landing charts that would have made even a difficult flight safer? The answers are found at an American military base in Germany, with some of the most senior members of the Air Force. In the spring of 1996, a US Air Force jet crashed just outside the airport in Dubrovnik, Croatia. None of the 35 people on board IFO-21 survived. The plane was a specially redesigned 737. But the investigators have found that the crew didn't have the equipment it needed to safely land in the war-ravaged airport. And that the charts they were using weren't up to American aviation standards. To discover why the crew were attempting to land in such difficult circumstances, the investigators questioned Colonel John Mazurowski. He's the operations group commander for the airlift wing in charge of the flight. His job is to provide transportation for a growing number of distinguished visitors. But these are tight budget times. Mazurowski has been told to do more with less.
What I'd like to talk about now is the Jeppesen approach subject.
One of the major focuses of the investigators is the Jeppesen landing charts the crew were using. The charts, drawn up for most major airports, give crews a vast amount of information, including what to do in the case of a missed approach. But investigator Howard Swansea has already found that these charts were not up to US standards.
The Air Force had a directive that required all procedures in foreign countries to have gone through a U.S. or their evaluation process prior to an Air Force crew being able to fly that approach.
Landing at the Dubrovnik airport had not been approved. The Jeppesen landing charts that did exist for the airport had not been reviewed. It's the reason that Howard Swansea found a difference between what the charts said and what was considered safe by the Defense Department. Mazurowski believed that restricting his planes to approved airports would severely limit some of his missions. It takes time to check all the airports out. He had asked for the review to be waived for some airports, including Dubrovnik.
This Jeppesen approach waiver, What caused you to initiate this?
It just seemed like we had been using these approaches for years. Safety didn't seem to be in question.
But the Defense Department waiver was never granted. The approach for Dubrovnik was never approved. Yet even without the safety clearance, the Air Force continued to land there.
IFO 21, level 100.
Dubrovnik approach, good afternoon.
The airport in Dubrovnik was far below modern standards. The charts used to land there hadn't been checked by the Department of Defense. Nevertheless, senior Air Force officials had decided to permit landing at Dubrovnik and other airports they were flying into.
In fact, none of them have been approved in this time frame.
Not to my knowledge, sir. No.
In the end, a fatal combination of factors had come together to cause the crash of IFO 21.
Dubrovnik approach, IFO 21, level 100.
Dubrovnik approach, good afternoon. Maintain 10,000 feet for beacon approach. Runway 12.
IFO 21.
The crew were fighting bad weather. They were landing in an unfamiliar airport, which was hobbled by old technology. The unapproved charts made a bad situation much worse. After an investigation involving nearly 150 interviews, the final report on the crash of IFO 21 exceeds 7,000 pages.
How much of the weeping we have done this last week because there were so many brilliant young people on that plane with him from different backgrounds and different racial groups. Why? Because Ron Brown could see in them the promise of a new tomorrow.
The results of the investigation fault several individuals and institutions. Dubrovnik Airport is singled out for an improperly designed instrument approach procedure. Today, automatic direction finders are no longer needed to land at Dubrovnik. The airport has replaced its approach equipment with the instrument landing system which was being delivered at the time of the accident.
I got CV.
The final report says A.J. Davis and his cockpit crew are responsible for flight errors. And, like a bullet piercing the heart of Air Force operations, leading military figures are blamed for a failure of command. In the aftermath of the report, 2 senior members of the Air Force are relieved of their posts. The Air Force severely reprimands Colonel John Mazurowski for dereliction of duty. He is demoted and eventually retires as a major. 13 other officers are also singled out for their roles in connection with the crash. The Air Force also changed the way it did business. All military aircraft were ordered to carry flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders. No aircraft is allowed to fly into an airport without approval from the Department of Defense, not even for high-ranking diplomats.
IFO 21. Sir, we are inside the locator, inbound.
IFO 21, roger. Cleared for beacon approach.
Runway is 1.
IFO 21.
The Air Force Command was held accountable for the accident. But it's the pilots, the crew, and the passengers of IFO 21 who paid the ultimate price for oversights made by the 86th Airlift Command. High above the North Sea, an aging propeller plane tumbles from the sky.
The first headline was sabotage.
Investigators consider a string of possibilities. It takes 2 years to find the cause.
Unbelievable.
It's something that's never been seen in any previous investigation.
They looked at that and said, man, oh man, how could that be?
It would lead to arrests half a world away and call into question the safety of one of the world's most important planes, Air Force One.
It reached all the way to the aviation that flies around the President of the United States.
.30 p.m., September the 8th, 1989.
Oh, hang on.
Knut Tvetem and Finn Petter Berg are flying a charter flight from Oslo, Norway, to the German city of Hamburg.
Partner 394, radar service terminated.
The plane is about 100 kilometers from the Danish coast.
124.55 by partner 394. How was dinner?
Delicious. A little pricey, but delicious.
The two friends have flown around the world together, including remote areas of Africa. They're highly experienced, and both are only months away from retirement.
Copenhagen, good afternoon. Partner 394, flight level.
Partner 394, good afternoon. Radar contact, Copenhagen control.
394.
The plane is flying 22,000 feet above the North Sea. The aircraft they're flying is a twin-prop Convair 340-580. It's a popular plane for short routes like this one. The plane has been chartered by the Norwegian shipping company Wilhelmsen. All 50 passengers are winners of a company lottery, sending them on a free trip to Hamburg to name a new ship.
Some had maybe been to naming ceremonies before, but the naming ceremonies are quite exciting. And the atmosphere was very, very, very good at the time of leaving.
One of the company's best employees is chosen to give a speech at the christening of the ship in Hamburg.
You have to deliver a speech, and it's not so very often that normal person within a company is giving the honor of naming a ship. But I just felt that that was right.
As the Convair crosses the North Sea, a Norwegian Air Force F-16 approaches the plane on its way home.
Whoa, look at that, 11 o'clock.
F-16.
Suddenly, the plane experiences a violent shock. The crew is caught by surprise. The plane begins rolling upside down. Air traffic control notices that Partner 394 is off course and falling from the sky.
Partner 394, Copenhagen control. Please report new flight level.
The crew is struggling to save the plane and the lives of everyone on board.
Terrain, what new flight level? Hold up. Terrain. Hold up.
Please report new flight level.
Then it disappears. It seems as though the charter flight has crashed into the sea.
Partner 394 en route to Hamburg is off radar.
Rescue teams race to the crash site, nearly 20 kilometers north of the Danish coast. They find only wreckage and bodies. All 55 people who were on the flight are dead.
I knew all the people. Some were close friends, some were less close, but I knew them all. And the pressure then felt double.
The shipping company is devastated by the news. Half the staff from its head office has been killed. It's the biggest airline disaster in Norwegian history. The nation is in shock. Jan Ovind is a young reporter for Norway's largest newspaper. He's assigned to cover this story.
One of the inspectors in the Norwegian FAA jumped to the conclusion that it had to be sabotage. And it was also stated by one of the Danish rescue team leaders, who said that they had no distress call. It just fell out of the sky, which meant it had to be a bomb or something. And somebody drew links to Lockerbie the year before.
In December 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland. The evidence in that case is pointing conclusively to a bomb. Norwegian journalists uncover an intriguing fact about the partner plane.
Our Prime Minister at the time, Gro Harlem Brundtland, she used the plane on her campaign trip to the north of Norway. And I guess she used it for 2 or 3 days. And that was just 2 or 3 days before it crashed.
The nation wonders, could the tragedy have been a botched assassination attempt?
The first headline was sabotage then on the whole front page.
A bomb would explain the plane's sudden plunge from the sky. Had the 55 people on board been the innocent victims of a murderer? Investigators looking into the mysterious downing of a passenger jet over the North Sea are facing a stunning possibility: that the plane was deliberately sabotaged. The Norwegian Accident Investigation Board recruits an Air Force investigator, Finn Heimdall, to join the team. It will be a severe test of his investigative skills.
It's good to be here.
I started many years ago with the Air Force. And of course, I saw some investigations mishandled terribly, and I thought it can be done better than that.
Investigators hear from several witnesses who lend support to the idea that the plane was sabotaged. A young man claims to have heard a cannon-like sound coming from the crash site off the Danish coast. It may have been the explosion that brought down the partner plane. Searchers scour the surface of the sea for floating debris and for victims of the crash. Eventually, all but 5 bodies are found. They're taken to Denmark for autopsies. Those examinations reveal that some of the victims have small puncture-like wounds. This supports the notion that a bomb brought down Partner Flight 394. An autopsy on the first officer also uncovers something unusual. A complete, unbroken toothpick is discovered in his stomach.
Yeah, that was a odd finding, really, because it was pointed in both ends, and how can you swallow a toothpick like that? So he must have been exposed to a very shocking experience.
Please report new flight level.
But investigators can't confirm that a bomb brought down the plane. They'll need to know more about the final moments of Flight 394.
Partner 394 en route to Hamburg is off radar.
Nine separate radar stations tracked its final seconds. They could provide valuable clues. The most intriguing readings come from a military radar station in Sweden. Operators there tracked the Partner flight as it crossed the North Sea.
It started 1436.
The military radar has detected something unexpected. There is another object in the same airspace as the plane. It is not another airplane. It appears as Flight 394 started to plummet from 22,000 feet.
Idea what it is?
Simply didn't know what it was from the beginning. We had no idea what it could have been. It took more than half an hour, something like 38 minutes, and the question was, what is light enough to fall that slowly and solid enough to give radar returns like that?
Whatever the mysterious object was, it now lies at the bottom of the sea. A month after the crash, investigators are busy recovering sunken wreckage. They've plotted the position of the wreckage on the ocean floor using side-scan sonar. It sends out sound waves that are reflected back when they encounter objects. The sonar equipment has painted a remarkably accurate picture of the underwater wreckage. It helps investigators see that the plane parts have settled over a 2-kilometer wide area. It's an important piece of evidence.
It was evident that the aircraft had come apart in the air. It hadn't hit the sea in one piece, that was for sure.
The mid-air breakup suggests a bomb brought down the plane. But it will take weeks to prove this. In the meantime, investigators hope the plane's black boxes will provide more immediate insight into the crash. The plane's voice recorder and eventually its data recorder are recovered from the seabed and sent to labs for analysis. Both boxes were damaged in the crash. Investigators hope the damage to the boxes didn't affect the data.
Well, let's see what we got.
The voice recorder may have picked up a conversation between the pilots that can explain what happened on board.
Avionics, CVR.
On? That's required.
Auto feather system.
Armed to 2 green.
The device usually records the final minutes of a flight, but this CVR has done the opposite.
Beta lights off.
Power.
It recorded the start of the flight, but then mysteriously stopped recording just before the plane took off.
Well, it had recorded the conversation on the ground, but as soon as the engines were upshifted to normal RPM for takeoff, it ceased operations. So that was a disappointment to us.
But the malfunctioning CVR did pick up an intriguing exchange between the two pilots.
How's the weather in Hamburg?
Oh, it's clear skies, good visibility.
Hope it stays that way.
The CVR does tell investigators that Flight 394 began with an unusual problem.
Partner was in financial dire straits, and we found out that just a few hours before the plane took off, the Norwegian aviation authorities sent out a telex to tell all the airports in Norway to don't let a partner plane take off because they owe a lot of money in non-paid charges and fees.
They won't release us for takeoff until we pay the catering bill.
How much you got on ya?
Seriously?
Huh?
Probably enough, actually. I'll take care of it then.
The first officer was forced to leave the cockpit to pay the caterers for onboard meals. Investigators check maintenance records to find out why the CVR only recorded the crew's conversation while they were on the ground. They discover that the plane's cockpit voice recorder had been modified more than 10 years earlier.
Modified to switch to primary AC.
It was altered so that when the engines were given full power for takeoff,
Your power.
the CVR would automatically switch from the plane's batteries to its generator.
And that modification was not working on this aircraft.
Neither pilot realized that as the engines were revved up for takeoff, power to the CVR was actually cut off.
Anytime you get key investigation components such as the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder that don't work correctly, it brings into question the thoroughness of the maintenance and also the continued operation, safe operation of the airplanes.
The malfunctioning voice recorder and the unpaid catering bill lead investigators to look more closely at the history of the airplane and the company that owned it, Partner Airlines. Partner operated a fleet of mostly older planes that flew to northern European destinations. The Convair that crashed into the North Sea was one of the airline's most recent acquisitions. But the plane itself was 36 years old. It had a complicated history of both ownership and modification. The biggest change was to the plane's engines.
The really important modification was upgrading the engines to turbine engines.
On prop planes, the propeller moves air backwards, propelling the plane forward. Early prop planes used piston engines to turn the propeller. But turbine engines, which use a series of fans, not pistons, to compress air, generate substantially more power. Heimdall learns that in 1960, the plane's original piston engines were removed and powerful new turboprops were bolted to the wings. It's a modification that provides more power, but could pose a risk.
When there was a tremendous increase of horsepower installing the turbine engines, I was wondering what that was doing to the structure of the aircraft.
Heimdall has been placed in charge of analyzing the plane's engines. He wants to know if the turbine engines could have torn the aging plane apart.
I started asking the question, how can an aircraft fly itself to pieces in midair?
The plane's flight data recorder should tell investigators about the operation of the engines in the moment before the crash. The recorder from this flight is a primitive analog model.
Used a metal foil strip that rotated, and some marking pins actually scratched on the metal surface, on the piece of metal.
The antiquated data recorder proves to be another frustration for investigators. It didn't record many of the parameters it was supposed to. But more mysteriously, the needle seems to have recorded certain signals twice. The double line confounds experts who analyze the device.
We had no experience with anything like that. We contacted several experts, but none had experience with this before.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
The flight data doesn't offer investigators any immediate revelations about the crash. Heimdall now wonders if the very fact that the recorder was malfunctioning could be a clue in itself. He decides to send the flight data recorder back to the American company that made it for further analysis. Investigators painstakingly reconstruct the Partner plane.
The Norwegian team recovered the airplane with assistance from the local authorities, the Danish authorities, I believe, and decided to reconstruct the airplane. A reconstruction is like putting together a puzzle that helps investigators focus the investigation on areas that need to be looked at and helps prioritize the investigation.
As the fuselage takes shape, the reconstructed plane provides investigators with some stunning evidence.
The only thing that would destroy the aircraft at cruising level would be an explosion. So, and some of the parts looked maybe a bit suspicious.
Suspicious for what's on them.
There were rumors that it was found explosives in the partner plane.
There are traces of a powerful military explosive. The amount is small, but the press gets wind of it. The explosive residue could be from a bomb on board the plane, or from another source. A NATO war exercise called Operation Sharp Spear was taking place that same day near the flight path of Flight 394.
One of the pilots I talked to, he said, I guess it might have been the so-called cold rocket, test rocket, might have gone through one of the wings or the fuselage.
Many people now wonder if an errant warhead played a role in bringing down the plane.
Pull up, terrain. Pull up, terrain. Pull up.
But when the explosive residue is analyzed, it's found not to have been from a bomb or a warhead. There simply isn't enough of it on the plane.
There was a small sign of explosives, but that was a very low level and looked more like a contamination than anything else.
Many battles have been fought off the Danish coast. The sea is littered with old munitions. Investigators believe the plane picked up some explosive residue while lying on the ocean floor. Explosives are ruled out as a cause of this crash. Metallurgist Terry Heaslip has been brought in. He examines the plane's reconstructed tail and makes a startling observation. Pieces of the plane's skin show evidence of damage from overheating.
Which means that it was flexing. And you take a coat hanger and you go like that, back and forth. If you hold it close to where it's going to break, you'll burn your hand because you develop heat where you're doing the fatiguing. It's the same thing on an airplane.
The evidence is pointing to a problem with the plane's tail. Investigators are keen to look at a massive generator recovered from the rear of the aircraft. The auxiliary power unit is housed inside the Convair's rear fin. It's a backup power generator that's usually only used while the plane is on the ground. Heimdall inspects the device and discovers that some melted plastic parts from the plane's cabin have found their way inside the APU's turbine. It gives him an important new piece of information about what was happening on the plane at the moment it failed.
Meaning that the cabin had failed when the APU was still operating.
The APU should not have been running while the plane was in the air. The fact that it was means the APU could be behind this crash. Investigators try to learn more about what happened on the day of the crash. They interview the mechanic who inspected the plane that morning. He reports that one of the plane's two main generators wasn't working, and that he wasn't able to repair it. Regulations demand that the plane have two sources of power before it's allowed to take off. The first officer comes up with a solution that will allow the flight to leave. He tells the airline that he will use the auxiliary power unit throughout the flight as a substitute for the malfunctioning main generator.
Okay, I want you to write this in the logbook. Released for flight with APU generator operative. We'll use the APU to power the left side AC system. APU is coming on. Mayday, lights off.
Your power.
During his inspection of the APU, Heimdall makes an important discovery.
When I saw the part, I saw that it was not an aircraft standard part at all. It was made in a very primitive way by a piece of iron and welding it together in a substandard way.
He notices that one of the mounts attaching the APU to the plane is broken. The unit contains a rapidly spinning turbine that generates electricity. If it wasn't properly held in place, it could have caused this crash. Investigators need to know if the broken APU caused the crash. They'll soon discover that it's just a piece of a much more troubling puzzle. Investigators have discovered that Partner Flight 394 was flying with a broken APU mount. Metallurgist Terry Heaslip performs extensive testing on the failed part.
My initial reaction was that the welding was bad, was probably inappropriate.
Heaslip wants to know when the strut broke. If it happened during the plane's last flight, it could explain the accident.
I could see the impact markings and the progression markings on it that showed that it did not fail in a single overload during this last accident flight.
The way the broken mount is worn down also tells Heaslip that the mount holding the APU in place didn't break on the day of the accident. It was broken long before Flight 394 took off. Investigators now need to know what effect the broken mount had on the flight.
40,000 RPMs. Do a lot of damage.
The APU is a large gyroscope having a tremendous amount of energy in it when it's rotating. And if that energy is transmitted to the surroundings, the fuselage, the structure, it could impact the whole vibration pattern in the tail.
Investigators want to know if anyone had felt vibrations on this particular plane. Interviews with people who flew on it provide some answers.
Listen, we appreciate your coming in. Thanks a lot. Now, you said you felt some rumbling on the plane, is that right?
One person stated that the plane that crashed vibrated far more than the two other Convairs owned by the company.
Did anything seem unusual on the plane?
But others failed to mention the vibrations.
Had a good flight.
It's a puzzling situation. Investigators know the APU mount was broken before the flight, but they still don't know if it even played a role in the crash, or whether it would have affected the plane's tail. Then the reconstruction begins to clear things up. Heimdall discovers that two doors from the plane's tail have not been found.
When we reassembled the parts from the tail, we saw that the rudder had been torn apart in two major pieces and some parts were missing. In particular, the doors between the fin and the rudder were missing.
The shroud doors are two small doors located on the vertical fin of the plane. They provide mechanics with access to weights inside the fin that control the rudder's movement. Heimdall makes a dramatic find about the doors themselves. They were constructed with an aluminium honeycomb liner. From his days in the Air Force, Heimdall knows they have a unique property.
This is thin aluminum foil, as you know, and it has the good reflective properties for radar, and it's very light. The military use it to disturb radar signals, call it chaff.
Investigators now realize that the unidentified object picked up by Swedish radar was probably a piece of one of the shroud doors.
But when we connected the missing doors and honeycomb with the radar data, we knew that it had happened up at cruising altitude, because the slow-falling object had come from very high level, cruising altitude practically.
Investigators conclude that the tail began to break apart at 22,000 feet before it plummeted from the sky. But why had the doors fallen off in mid-flight? Whatever caused the shroud doors to tear off likely caused the crash. Investigators know that the rudder's counterweights are located just inside the shroud doors. If a rudder moves too violently from side to side, the weights do as well.
We found enough pieces to show that it was just pounding these doors. And the first real components that came off were the honeycomb in those doors.
Investigators conclude that around the time of the accident, something caused the rudder to swing violently back and forth, but they still don't know what.
The APU with the broken front shock mount on its own, running in flight, would not cause the aircraft to come apart and the tail to come apart. There had to be extra factors there for that to occur.
Investigators continue searching for those extra factors. Then Partner Airlines proposes one. They point to the F-16 that passed over the plane just minutes before the plane veered off course.
Whoa, look at that, 11 o'clock.
F-16.
Partner claims the military jet was flying faster than it should have been. They also believe that it came much closer to the flight than officially reported.
Partner, they contacted the Swedish investigator, and he came out with the answer that the F-16 could probably have gone through the sound barrier as it passed just over the partner plane. When a fighter jet or any other plane breaks the sound barrier, you have this pressure wave, and their theory was that this pressure wave just got the plane to disintegrate in the air.
But the Norwegian F-16 pilot testifies that he was more than 1,000 feet above the Convair when he passed it. Investigators calculate just how close the F-16 would have had to be in order to seriously disturb Flight 394. They determined that for the F-16's pressure wave to have affected the Convair, it would have had to fly within a few meters of the plane. There's no evidence the two planes were ever that close.
Okay, good work.
90% of the plane's wreckage has been recovered from the sea. But investigators still don't know what caused the Convair's tail to come off in mid-air. During the course of the investigation, Finn Heimdall is given a promotion, but he has no idea how to solve the puzzle that haunts his nation.
They asked me to be in charge of the rest of the hardware investigation. I was standing in a heap of wrecked parts and thinking I'll never get to an end of this.
Investigators get a break when the faulty flight data recorder is analyzed in the United States. The manufacturer has asked its top expert to come out of retirement and examine the device.
Manufacturer Fairchild referred us to a previous employee, and we found him in California.
The expert tells investigators that the needle that was supposed to be recording the plane's altitude was shaking so much that it was leaving another mark on the foil. But then he goes one step further. The FDR has a capacity to record for hundreds of hours. By unspooling the metal foil completely, he sees that the FDR has been vibrating severely for months.
We saw that this had happened something like 360 operations hours before the accident.
I had never seen an abnormality like that before, and it took us a while to figure out what was going on here.
It now seems the APU wasn't the only thing vibrating on this plane. Investigators decide to chart the history of the vibrations chronologically. They notice an unusual change in the pattern of vibrations. 2 months before the crash, the vibrations suddenly stopped for a number of weeks.
Virtually no vibrations for at least 16 flights.
It was increasing intensity and frequency up to the summer of '89. And then the pattern changed.
After getting better, the pattern of vibrations got worse again, right up until the crash.
What happened here?
Investigators now need to find out what changed on the plane during the 2-week period when the vibrations stopped.
Why was it out of service? Where was the work done?
The airline tells investigators that during that time, the plane was receiving a major overhaul in Western Canada.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
The work was done by the plane's previous owner, a Canadian company that specializes in servicing Convaires. During the various test flights there, the FDR recorded almost no excessive vibrations. This healthy pattern continued on several passenger flights once the overhaul was done and the plane returned to Norway. Investigators review the maintenance records. Heimdall finds that during the overhaul, mechanics found signs of wear on one of the 4 bolts that connect the vertical fin to the plane's tail. These 4 bolts are the only things holding the tail to the fuselage. During the overhaul of the Convair in July of 1989, a mechanic replaced one of the 4 bolts. The information from the flight data recorder reveals that the vibrations in the tail stopped right after that 1 bolt was replaced.
You see that? And as they go across.
Incredibly, investigators are able to recover all 4 of the bolts which were holding the tail in place. Terry Heaslip thoroughly analyzes the bolts. He makes a final stunning discovery. The 3 bolts that weren't replaced were not approved parts.
We did metallurgical testing and we did mechanical testing. And by doing all of these analyses, we worked out that the 3 of the assemblies were not up to scratch. They were bogus assemblies.
His analysis shows that the faulty bolts were incorrectly heat-treated when they were made. As a result, they are only 60% as strong as they should have been. Investigators finally know why the tail was vibrating for months.
Got something for me?
3 of the bolts holding it in place were too weak.
They just weren't hard enough.
Unbelievable.
3 bolts holding the tail to the rest of the plane were not authentic parts. They were well-disguised fakes. The weak bolts mean investigators now must answer a critical question.
Why didn't the tail come off in the previous 16 flights where it vibrated excessively? Why this last flight?
Investigators already know that on the day of the accident flight, a power generator wasn't working, and that the pilots improvised a solution.
Okay, I want you to write this in the logbook. Released for flight with APU generator operative. We'll use the APU to power the left side AC system. APU is coming on.
The pilots didn't realize that the APU mount was broken and the motor was vibrating considerably. Their decision to run it throughout the flight made a bad situation worse.
The reason why things got bad on this particular flight is that the APU was literally floating on 2 mounts instead of 3.
This, along with the faulty bolts, created even more vibrations in the tail of the plane.
And when you get the two of them shaking, if they ever get into sync, what we call resonance with each other, disaster.
The investigators conclude that the vibrations in the tail and the vibrations from the APU could have combined into a lethal force.
Now, this is what we got from the guys at MIT. Technically, the vibrations could have torn the plane apart.
If the two loose items start to vibrate in the same frequency, now you're going to get, or a multiple of that frequency, you get what's called coupled harmonics. And the one vibration is feeding the other one. They're feeding each other and making each other worse and worse.
The most famous example of coupled harmonics occurred on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State in 1940. The newly built steel and concrete bridge began swaying lengthwise, and then a crosswind started dipping it left to right. The two vibrations moving in different directions combined to create a violent twisting motion that tore the bridge apart. Investigators calculate that the same effect tore apart Flight 394.
And we said, my gosh, that's exactly the phenomenon we have here.
This lethal combination of vibrations caused the tail to sway back and forth so violently that the rudder jammed to the left. This forced the plane into a left turn so abrupt that it increased airflow over the right wing, creating greater lift and causing the aircraft to roll. The plane recovered briefly, but the rudder jams to the left again, and the shroud doors explode. It rolls a second time. The tail begins to disintegrate. After that, the crew didn't have a hope. Investigators conclude that it was the 3 bogus bolts that initiated the partner crash.
And I looked at that and said, man, oh man, how could that be in a crucial component, a crucial fitting like that in the tail? I couldn't believe it.
The report on Partner Flight 394 sends shockwaves throughout the aviation industry. It's the first time that a fatal plane crash has been linked to unapproved spare parts. It raises a frightening question. How many of the parts being put into planes around the world are bogus?
The Partner crash, that was the seminal event that started people actually having to recognize the unapproved parts problem and the fact that the worldwide inventories of aircraft parts, in fact, were contaminated.
There are 6 million moving parts on a 747 alone. The spare parts business is a $45 billion industry. And at the time of the crash, that industry was largely unregulated. Mary Schiavo is the former Inspector General of the Department of Transportation, the agency that oversees the FAA.
No one knew how large the problem was. They knew it was a problem because of a crash, but how big was the problem in the United States? So we set out to measure it. We started by auditing the FAA's own parts bins. And the FAA's own parts bins contained 39% bogus parts. What we found is if the parts had come from a parts broker, which was a huge percentage of the parts supply industry, 95% of them were not authentic.
The FAA would soon find bogus parts on an airplane widely considered to be the most secure plane on Earth. There are 5,000 parts brokers in the United States, many of them in the Miami area.
Parts brokers had no regulation whatsoever. You had a telephone and a fax. You were a parts broker. Overnight, you could be in the parts brokerage business, and you could get them anywhere you chose. You could get them from junkyards, you could get them from scrap facilities, you could get it from old planes, you could get them from crashes, you could get them from people who are willing to manufacture and don't care about the law.
Spare parts for airplanes are expensive, A single bolt, like the one holding on the Partner flight's vertical fin, can cost up to $250. A bogus one can cost as little as $30.
Which makes it a bargain. And when you have situations like you have today, and airlines are bottom line driven, and you've got 8 or 10 major airlines in the United States, for example, that are on the verge of bankruptcy, they're looking to cut costs.
The FAA launches a major investigation into illegal parts and uses sting operations to uncover unscrupulous dealers. Investigators uncover a black market industry that makes thousands of worn and inferior parts look brand new.
These are really good counterfeits. It's very difficult to tell.
At the time of the Partner accident, there were checks and balances in the system that were supposed to keep bogus parts from getting on major airlines. For instance, each spare part needs someone's signature to verify its authenticity.
It has to have some documentation that states that it's airworthy. It has to have a maintenance release by some certificated entity.
But investigators discover that in addition to a huge market in spare parts, there's also a burgeoning market for counterfeit FAA tags.
We'd execute search warrants and find that people had printed stacks of fake yellow tags, and in many cases they'd sign with the name of an actual inspector, but they just forged the signature.
The tag in this business is worth more than the part.
At first, investigators believe the problem is mostly with smaller airlines.
Smaller operators and repair stations are usually the people who are most vulnerable to this aftermarket broker parts problem.
They're shocked when they discover that bogus parts have been found on what is supposed to be the most tightly controlled plane in the world, Air Force One.
It reached all the way to what many people consider literally the highest levels of aviation, the aviation that flies around the President of the United States. Supposedly in an airtight supply chain, we had bogus parts cases that touched those aircraft.
The FAA responds quickly. More than 100 dealers are arrested.
With every conviction, we were able to raise the level of awareness, not only of the problem, but of the severe consequences if you want to risk somebody's life. And I actually think that the most important thing that we did was get criminal convictions.
As a result of their investigation, the FAA institutes a much more rigorous system for documenting airplane parts. They threaten airlines with criminal charges if they knowingly accept bogus parts.
Things are different today because we have a whole body of regulations, much more than we had in the 80s and 90s even, to address the problem.
You have to get the mechanic who's actually got the wrench in his hand to a point of sophistication where he's knowledgeable enough to smell a bad part, to smell a bad piece of paper. And it is possible to do.
The new regulations achieved their goal. In the 2 decades following the crash of Partner 394, there wasn't a single fatal accident attributed to bogus parts. Years after the Partner crash, Finn Heimdall became the head of the Norwegian Accident Investigation Board.
Jimmy, my friend. It was a major puzzle that an aircraft, for no obvious reason, could more or less disintegrate in midair.
His report into the accident resulted in major changes that likely saved lives.
That's the positive thing, but the negative, of course, is the tragedy, the personal tragedy to many people.
One of the smallest parts on a Norwegian charter plane failed in 1989. Because investigators found the cause of that accident, passengers around the world are safer. less likely to be on a plane that's fitted with bogus parts.